Chapter 251. After driving back to school, Yonghua first brought some things from America to the dean. In the end, she was scolded by the dean. Chun Zongdai scolded him for going to America for so long and neglecting his studies. Secondly, he scolded him for having nowhere to spend his money and buying useless things. In the end, Chun Zongdai accepted his disciple's gift and told him to quickly catch up on his studies. Poplar Fruit was scolded by the dean and left the school building with a gloomy face. He then went to the teacher's apartment to find Fong Beibei. She didn't have any classes today, so she stayed in the apartment to study. The content was naturally mathematics. As for English, without Poplar Fruit's supervision, how could she take the initiative to study? "You're finally back." Before Fong Beibei's voice fell, a golden figure jumped out from the bedroom and pounced on Poplar Fruit, Kiki in his arms. Of course, Goldie couldn't jump that high. Although it grew very fast, it could only touch Poplar Fruit's belt at most. However, it jumped up excitedly and pulled Poplar Fruit's pants. It almost bit down. "Goldie!" Kiki shouted happily and reached out to touch it. Poplar Fruit couldn't even hug it. Poplar Fruit put Kiki on the floor. Fong Beibei wiped it clean anyway, so the two little ones could play. Goldie was now a little bigger than Kiki. Kiki couldn't even hold it down. The girl and the dog rolled around on the floor and laughed nonstop. Poplar Fruit quickly moved all the dangerous items on the chairs and stools next to them. "Didn't you say you would come back tomorrow?" Fong Beibei asked. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "I had something to do, so I came over first. If you didn't come back, the girls in my dormitory would have taken Jeanzi for themselves." Fong Beibei told Poplar Fruit about the time she brought Jeanzi back to her dormitory. As a result, Goldie, this cute pet, became the apple of everyone's eye in the dormitory next door, and the dormitory next door. More than a dozen girls surrounded Goldie, and the food they ate piled up into a small mountain. Goldie was almost stuffed to death. "Guess what I brought you?" After saying this, Poplar Fruit turned around and found that Fong Beibei had already opened the bag he had brought. "Do you still need to guess?" Fong Beibei said as she took it out. "I found it by myself. Clothes, bags, and some food." Fong Beibei looked at the bag with two inverted arcs and was shocked. "Chanel? Why did you buy this for me? Don't you know that this is very expensive? You don't like it?" Poplar Fruit opened his mouth and said while scratching his head, "I saw that your bag is a bit old." He did not have the habit of buying branded items, but he did have money now, so he did not think that a few $100s was expensive. "I know how to bring a bag, but there's no need to buy such an expensive one." Fong Beibei frowned and said with a look of disdain, "A few $1,000s. What can I do? A bag that costs a few $100s can't be that bad. Money can be used to do good deeds." "Then what should I do?" Poplar Fruit asked hesitantly. "Since I've already bought it, I won't buy something so expensive next time." "How can I accept such expensive things when you bought me such an expensive one?" Fong Beibei insisted and shook her head firmly. "I'll accept these snacks and bring them back to eat with my roommates. You can deal with the rest." Fong Beibei felt that her words were a bit harsh, so she looked into Poplar Fruit's eyes and added, "Don't feel bad. It's so expensive. I really can't accept it, but I appreciate your kindness. I understand that you're doing this for my own good. All right, I'll see how to deal with it later." Poplar Fruit finally understood Fong Beibei's personality. He repacked the two items and thought that he should bring them home for his sister. She would like them. "Oh yeah." Poplar Fruit took out a card from his pocket and handed it to Fong Beibei. He said, "You have to keep this." "What's this from?" Fong Beibei took it and asked curiously. Clatter, clatter. Kiki probably grabbed Goldie's tail, and Goldie jumped up and accidentally knocked over the box that Poplar Fruit had just rearranged. The Chanel bag fell out. Poplar Fruit squatted down again helplessly and answered Fong Beibei while rearranging. "It's the money I told you about a few days ago. I sold the game for $6 million, and there's $3 million in your card. The password is Kiki's birthday." "Hey, I can't accept it." Fong Beibei stuffed the card back as if it was scalding her hand. "No, this is what you deserve. Why don't you accept it?" Poplar Fruit said with a headache. "That's too much." Fong Beibei shook her head and said, "I can't accept it." Poplar Fruit felt that she seemed to be subconsciously looking for an excuse not to accept it. "This game is your idea, your idea, and all the cards were designed by you. I didn't even use my brain. Besides, you sold it. Why are you giving me the money? No. Poplar Fruit felt that he should not push her too hard. He put down the card, leaned against the table, and stood next to Fong Beibei. He said, "Don't get agitated, listen to me." Fong Beibei took a deep breath and nodded, but her eyes were looking at Kiki and Goldie. "You made a lot of contributions to the birth of this game." Poplar Fruit said, "Think about it, if you didn't give me directions, how could I design the cards? If you didn't help to deal with the data problems, could the cards still be played? If you didn't stay up late to sort out the cards, how could I sell the cards so coincidentally?" But Fong Beibei just opened her mouth, and Poplar Fruit pressed her lips with his finger. "No buts. Your contribution can't be erased. It's very reasonable to give you half of it." Poplar Fruit felt Fong Beibei's soft lips, and his heart swayed. Since he broke up with Liu Yunran, he had not touched a woman's lips. But when he saw Fong Beibei's eyes staring at him, he had to take back his finger embarrassedly. "It's a little more money, but you can take it. It's $3 million. Didn't you say that money can be used to do good things? With so much money, you can do as many good things as you want." Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "For example, you can help Uncle and Annie do better at the relief station with hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't want me to keep the money and squander it all, do you?" "Don't you dare." Fong Beibei stared and snatched the card back. She touched the card, looked at Poplar Fruit, and asked him seriously, "Then how are you going to spend the remaining $3 million? You won't squander it to cheat the little girl, will you?" Poplar Fruit was dumbfounded. It was not easy to persuade Fong Beibei to take the money, but she began to plot against him. There is actually a loophole here. Xiaohan didn't deduct the income tax when he was lazy. You can just ignore it. Chapter 252. In the end, Poplar Fruit raised his index finger, middle finger, and ring finger and swore that he would put the 3 million yuan into good use. Only then did Fong Beibei let him go. "You're leaving?" Fong Beibei saw Poplar Fruit coming out of the bathroom. She picked up her car keys, wallet, and other belongings from the table and asked, "You just came back. Aren't you going to teach me today?" They didn't realize that they talked to each other as casually as if they were a family. However, Fong Beibei's words revealed a hint of reluctance. Of course, she didn't know whether she was reluctant to part with Jean Z or Kiki. Poplar Fruit, she hadn't thought about that yet. "No, I have something to do. I'll be back later." Poplar Fruit took out his sneakers from the shoe cabinet and said while putting them on, "Kiki and Jean Z will stay here. Can you take care of them for a while?" "Okay, don't worry." Fong Beibei picked up Kiki, who was lying on the ground like a human rag, and wiped her face with her hands. Poplar Fruit came to Fong Beibei in advance today, mainly because he wanted her to take care of Kiki, so that he could go to Guo family's Xingyi boxing club to denounce them. Initially, Yonghua thought that they would not cause trouble, so she had let Fu Lei and the rest off. But they kept coming to offend her. If they did not succeed the first time, they would come again. If they did not succeed, they would come again. They were as annoying as flies. It wasn't just Poplar Fruit's problem. They had interfered with the lives of Fong Beibei, Duan Xueqing, and even his daughter. Poplar Fruit was furious when he came out of Duan Xueqing's room last night. Today, he was going to solve this problem once and for all. The huge Land Rover stopped at the gate of Guo family's Xingyi boxing club. He accidentally saw the location of the car when he first bought it, so he was familiar with it today. Poplar Fruit opened the door and got out. A security guard came up to him and said, "Hey, you can't park here. Move away quickly." She glared at the security guard, and the security guard was so scared that he took 2 steps back. Firstly, Yonghua's car looked very expensive, and he couldn't afford to offend her. Secondly, Yonghua's eyes were a little red. This was a sign that Poplar Fruit was about to explode in anger. However, he clenched his fists and loosened them, turned back to the car, and drove. In the end, his heart softened. After all, the security guard was also a part-time worker and had never offended him. There was no need to ruin someone's livelihood over a small matter. Poplar Fruit came from the countryside, so he knew that it wasn't easy for people at the bottom of society to live. He pushed open the door and stepped into Guo family's Xingyi boxing club. A girl at the front desk came up to him and said, "Sir, are you here to learn martial arts?" The girl at the front desk was wearing a plain blue-striped martial arts uniform. Her hair was tied into two buns, and she looked very cute. However, Poplar Fruit didn't pay attention to her. He waved his hand and walked straight ahead. In front of him was a martial arts practice field the size of 2 basketball courts. The ground was covered with a layer of foam cushions. 20 or so young people in their teens and 20s were under the lead of a person. They were demonstrating fist and palm moves. Step forward, bursting fist. Bang! Step back, bursting fist. Bang! Twisting step, cannon fist. Bang! It could be seen that this group of young people were all beginners. Their fists were weak and their bodies were crooked. However, their shouts were very loud and they looked very orderly and imposing. The martial arts master who was leading them had some martial arts skills. His moves were on point, but he was old and his strength couldn't even be compared to Fu Lei. Poplar Fruit only looked at him for a moment before continuing to walk forward. "Hey!" The girl at the front desk hurriedly blocked Poplar Fruit's path and asked, "Sir, you can't go any further. If there's anything, can you tell me? We have to register first." This girl didn't sound like she was from Cantonese province. "Stop!" The martial arts master saw the commotion and raised his hand to stop his students. He then walked over and asked, "What happened?" "Nothing, nothing." The girl at the front desk quickly replied, "I'm looking for Fu Lei." Poplar Fruit looked at the martial arts master and said coldly. In his mind, he had already categorized the people of Gua Family Martial Arts School as the same type as the crew cut guy. The martial arts master frowned. Although he didn't have a high position in the school and could only guide the newbies, he was old and had more experience. From Poplar Fruit's aggressive manner, he felt that today's matter wasn't simple. He asked, "Fu Lei is a disciple of our inner school. Why are you looking for him?" The Gua Family Martial Arts School structure had to be mentioned. The school was divided into inner and outer schools. The outer school's main business was to provide martial arts enthusiasts and fitness enthusiasts with a place to practice martial arts and earn operating funds. The inner school mainly recruited young people with potential to be trained. Not only did it not take money, but it also provided food and accommodation, and even a good salary. Usually, the disciples of the inner school would not only practice under the guidance of the master and a few senior brothers, but they would also take turns to teach the outer school's disciples. Their main purpose of practicing martial arts was to participate in various martial arts competitions, not underground fighting, and win honor for the school and themselves. This could be considered a way of survival for modern martial arts schools. However, Poplar Fruit didn't care about the inner or outer school. The person he was looking for was Fu Lei. He said, "It's a personal grudge. Can you tell me where he is?" "Young man, don't be so impulsive." The martial arts master persuaded him. "This is a martial arts school, not a place for you to take revenge." Poplar Fruit frowned. He didn't want to continue talking nonsense with him. He walked around him and walked forward. "Hey!" Martial arts practitioners were always a little angry. Seeing Poplar Fruit being so stubborn, the martial arts master was furious. He reached out to grab Poplar Fruit's shoulder. Poplar Fruit felt it as soon as the martial arts master touched his shoulder. His reaction was very fast. The martial arts master saw Poplar Fruit's shoulder suddenly drop, and then his hand was twisted. Then a strong force pulled him. He lost his balance and fell forward. "Ah!" The girl at the front desk covered her mouth and let out a low cry. The 20 or so students who were watching the situation unfold were so shocked that their jaws dropped. Their teacher, who had been fighting fiercely just a moment ago, was knocked down by a thin and weak young man in one move. This was really too unexpected. "Ouch!" The martial arts master cried out in pain. Poplar Fruit didn't show any mercy. His chin hit the ground, and his teeth almost fell out. What happened? There were a few martial arts practice fields inside. The movement was too loud, and several martial arts masters heard it. They quickly ran over and helped the martial arts master who was groaning on the mat. Ouch, it hurts. He's looking for trouble with senior brother Fu Lei. The martial arts master who was taken down by Poplar Fruit said in pain. "Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than or equal to." Chapter 253. Brother, Did you come to the wrong place to pick a fight in our dojo? A boxer stood up and clenched his fists. I think you're looking for death. A fierce-looking boxer had a bad temper. Without waiting for Poplar Fruit to speak, he cursed and threw a punch at Poplar Fruit. Was this the way the Guo family's Xingyi boxing dojo did things? The crew-cut boy was like this, and so were these people. Poplar Fruit's eyes were burning with anger as he thought to himself, people who practice martial arts don't cultivate their moral character. All you do is shout and kill. I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your ancestors. The fierce-looking boxer's fists were as big as alms bowls. When he swung his fists, the students next to him cried out in alarm. However, his strength was average. Poplar Fruit could see that his lower body was unstable. He just grabbed the boxer's fist and used the force to twist it. The fierce-looking boxer fell to the ground. His butt hit the ground, and with the cushioning, it didn't hurt that much. However, the psychological difference made his eyes filled with surprise. Fuck, kid, you're so sneaky. Do you think there's no one in our dojo? The remaining 3 boxers came up, and one of them said angrily, Am I sneaky? You know who started it first. Poplar Fruit retorted coldly. I came here today to find Fu Lei. I don't want to cause trouble. If you want to find trouble with senior brother Fu Lei, you'll have to go through us first. One of the boxers said, Beat him up. The fierce-looking boxer shouted himself hoarse on the ground. He didn't have any serious injuries, but he felt that it was too shameful to be defeated in one move. Therefore, he became angry out of shame. Poplar Fruit's eyes turned cold. He slowly moved his left leg forward and slightly bent his right leg. His hands were in a fighting position. Looks like if I don't defeat them today, I won't be able to see Fu Lei and the other bastards again. The young boxer took the lead and rushed over. His Xingyi fist was pretty good. At the very least, when he punched, he used the drilling fist that he usually practiced and directly attacked Poplar Fruit's ribs. The speed of the punch was very fast. With the reaction speed of an ordinary person, it was impossible for them to dodge. But was Poplar Fruit an ordinary person? Poplar Fruit didn't even try to dodge. Seeing the drilling fist coming at him, he clenched his left thumb and turned his palm into a knife, chopping at the wrist joint of the young boxer's fist. Sigh. The young boxer couldn't clench his fist after being chopped by such a powerful force. He loosened his fist like a chicken claw. Just as he was about to cry out, he immediately swallowed it back down. Yang Guo raised his hind leg and kicked forward. The young boxer felt pain in his stomach and fell back. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to appreciate the scene of the young boxer rolling on the ground. The other 2 boxers rushed over from the left and right. The one on the left used the crushing fist, while the one on the right used the blasting fist. Poplar Fruit turned around and stretched out his left hand. He grabbed the left boxer's wrist and pressed it down. At the same time, he clenched his right fist and punched out. Only Poplar Fruit could multitask and use the left and right mutual attack that only existed in novels and movies. Facing the blasting fist from the right, Poplar Fruit didn't dodge this time. His right hand also used the blasting fist posture of Xingyi fist. The 2 fists collided with each other with a muffled bang. The right boxer used his strength first, while Poplar Fruit used his strength later. With his great strength and hard fists, Poplar Fruit didn't suffer any losses in this fight. Ouch! The right boxer held his right hand and knelt on the ground. His 5 knuckles were in great pain, as if they had been cracked. Tears flowed down his face. It's useless, Poplar Fruit said coldly. In fact, he had already saved his strength and only used less than 50% of it. If he used his full strength, the right hand of this boxer would be crippled. His left hand suddenly tightened. Yangguo turned his head and saw that the boxer on his left was holding his left hand tightly and using his body's strength to press it down. It was unknown when the fierce-looking boxer had stood up. He jumped over like a white crane spreading its wings. The tip of his right foot lit up as he ruthlessly kicked towards Yang Guozhing's ribs. Too shameless. Was this a gang fight between street thugs? How could this be? A cold light flashed in Poplar Fruit's eyes. He didn't pull his left hand out, but pressed it on the left boxer's body. He did a front somersault and barely dodged the kick of the fierce-looking boxer. Then his right leg flew diagonally and kicked the boxer's hind leg. The fierce-looking boxer jumped too fast and was kicked by Poplar Fruit while he was still in the air. His hind leg was the supporting leg when he landed. As a result, he lost his balance and fell down again. This time, he fell heavily. The white crane, spreading its wings, turned into a wild goose falling flat on the sand. He almost lost his breath from the fall. The boxer who held Poplar Fruit's left hand didn't fare any better. When Poplar Fruit retracted his right leg, he took advantage of the momentum to hit his shoulder and directly smashed him down. Thus, Poplar Fruit's left hand was freed. Again, feeling that someone was about to rush over from the side, Poplar Fruit raised his right fist and coldly looked at the young boxer, who had already stood up. The young boxer was startled. He stopped and looked at his fellow boxers who were lying on the ground. The painful cries didn't stop. He timidly took 2 steps back. After all, he wasn't a person who made a living by fighting in the underworld. He didn't have the courage to risk his life against an expert who repeatedly knocked down 4 or 5 boxers on his side. His shoulder was pressed. The young boxer was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. He was so scared that he cried out loudly and almost begged for mercy. When he turned around, he didn't know when a few people came behind him. They were all wearing the formal attire of the inner hall. Big brother. The young boxer seemed to have become stuttering as he stuttered in surprise. Poplar Fruit frowned and looked at the 5 newcomers. Compared to the previous few who were outwardly strong but inwardly weak, the 5 newcomers had a much stronger aura. They were generally not tall, only about 1.75 meters, but they were full of energy. They stood there with their hands on their hips or their arms crossed in front of their chests. Their legs were slightly apart, and the soles of their feet seemed to be rooted to the ground. At first glance, one could tell that they had a solid foundation of the 3 postures. As for the eldest senior brother who was leading the group, he was in his early 30s, but his muscles were taut and his fists were clenched tightly. One could see that his joints were thick even if he didn't clench his fists. He was comparable to Yang Jingdong. He was a master. Poplar Fruit judged in his heart. Of course, he was sure that the 5 of them combined couldn't beat Meng Sanhua. After all, Meng Sanhua had gone through life and death training. His martial arts had already formed his own style. He wasn't at the Grandmaster level, but he wasn't far from it. However, Poplar Fruit was still disappointed, because among the 5 newcomers, he still didn't see Fu Lei's figure. He even looked around the entire martial arts hall. He didn't even see the shadows of the people who appeared at the hot pot restaurant that day. Chapter 254. What's going on? How did it end up like this? The eldest senior brother asked the young boxer, who was startled by the mere twang of a bow. His voice was very deep, giving people the feeling of an announcer, which was very comfortable to listen to. With a backer, the young boxer straightened his back, pointed at Poplar Fruit, and said, "He came to make trouble, and we don't know how we provoked him. Eldest senior brother, you see, we were all injured by him." "You're distorting the truth." Poplar Fruit angrily pointed at him and scolded, "I've been saying since I came in that I'm looking for Fu Lei, and it has nothing to do with you. But you didn't let me off, and even hit me." "That's enough." The eldest senior brother stopped the young boxer from refuting and said, "You don't have to continue to add fuel to the fire. Little sister, come here." He reached out and waved at the receptionist who was standing next to him. "You tell me, is what this guest said true?" The eldest senior brother kindly asked the receptionist. "He's right." The receptionist hesitated for a moment and said truthfully, "He did come to look for senior brother Fu Lei, but teacher Chiu said it for the good of the martial arts school, because he also said that he had a grudge with senior brother Fu Lei." "That's right. Eldest senior brother, shouldn't our martial arts school be united? How can we let an outsider casually find trouble with our brothers?" The fierce-looking boxer at this time stood up and said, "Dear guest, I think what my junior brother said is not wrong, right?" The eldest senior brother cupped his hands and said to Poplar Fruit, "I don't know what kind of grudge you have with our junior brother Fu Lei, but if you find trouble with him in our martial arts school, my junior brothers have the right to intervene. I thought you were a sensible person, but I didn't expect you to continue to be biased indiscriminately." Poplar Fruit said with a sneer, "So, today I still have to fight with you one by one, before I can go find Fu Lei, right? You can't say it like that. Our master has always told us to cultivate our character when practicing martial arts. We can't casually cause trouble for others." Eldest senior brother still smiled at Poplar Fruit and said, "If you have anything to say to junior brother Fu Lei, I can help you call him back. Blackie, you go and make the call." "Yes." The fierce-looking boxer walked inside with an annoyed expression. "However, we still have to talk about how you injured our boxer." At this time, the eldest senior brother said seriously, "Those who open a martial arts school pay attention to the issue of face. You injured our martial arts master, which is equivalent to humiliating our Gua family martial arts school. If we let you do whatever you want, then how can we still open our martial arts school? It's better not to open a martial arts school like this that hides filth and raises a bunch of drunkards and scoundrels." Poplar Fruit sneered. Today, it could be said that he was adding fuel to the fire. He was already annoyed by Fu Lei and the others, and now he was repeatedly obstructed. Group after group of people refused to give up, making Poplar Fruit extremely angry. His words were not polite anymore. "You came to our martial arts school today to cause trouble, right?" At this time, the eldest senior brother could no longer hold back his anger. He removed his smile and glared at Poplar Fruit. The four boxers behind him also glared and clenched their fists. If it weren't for the eldest senior brother, they would have already rushed up to teach Poplar Fruit a lesson. After saying so much, you still want to fight. Then what's the point of all this nonsense? At this time, Poplar Fruit made a shingy fist starting gesture and coldly looked at the boxers from the Gua family martial arts school. Today, he planned to use shingy fist to dampen their spirit. "Eldest senior brother, you don't have to do it. I'll do it." One of the boxers strode forward and said to the eldest senior brother, "Liang Zitsong, don't use too much force." The eldest senior brother didn't force him and nodded. Even a clay figurine would have some anger. He tried to persuade Poplar Fruit for a while. Seeing that Poplar Fruit was still as arrogant as before, he also wanted to teach Poplar Fruit a lesson. However, his temperament was more upright. When he let the inner martial arts school's best boxers attack, he still couldn't help but remind Poplar Fruit. Liang Zitsong nodded and stood still. Then, he followed up with an azure dragon out at sea and a collapsing punch. Shingy Fist was different from Tai Chi. Most of its fighting styles were short and direct. It was mostly used to kill enemies in the military. There was no such thing as waiting for the enemy to attack. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was used to waiting for the opponent to attack. The more orthodox Liang Zitsong directly attacked. Poplar Fruit wasn't afraid. He stepped forward and used a horizontal punch to parry Liang Zitsong's collapsing punch. Then he returned an even more powerful punch. Liang Zitsong had some martial arts. He turned around and dodged. Then he raised his drilling punch and punched towards Poplar Fruit's ribs. Taking a step back, Poplar Fruit slightly dodged Liang Zitsong's punch. Then he threw a collapsing punch back. The speed of his punch was even faster. Liang Zitsong only had time to raise his arm to block it. Liang Zitsong shook his arm as he retreated. His entire arm was numb from Poplar Fruit's punch. Poplar Fruit didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he stood still and looked at him. Actually, if he used the Tai Chi that Poplar Fruit was most familiar with, Liang Zitsong would have been defeated long ago. He wouldn't have had the chance to exchange punches. However, Poplar Fruit wanted to use Shingy Fist. Moreover, he held back his strength. That was why they were entangled for a few rounds. The pain in Liang Zitsong's arm lessened a little. After all, he was often beaten when he practiced martial arts or fought in competitions. He rested for a few breaths and pounced forward again. Chop fist. Poplar Fruit pressed down on Liang Zitsong's fist. His right fist turned into a palm and slapped along Liang Zitsong's arm to his chest. Poplar Fruit didn't use any strength at all because the chest was connected to the heart and lungs. If he used any strength, Liang Zitsong would probably vomit blood. Poplar Fruit decided to let him go for the sake of the eldest senior brother's warning of don't use too much strength. However, Liang Zitsong took 2 steps back and looked at his chest. He didn't stop. He felt that he had been beaten back by Poplar Fruit so many times today. He was a little embarrassed. He shouted and rushed forward again. The eldest senior brother was tactful. He saw some clues and was about to shout for him to stop. However, he was still a step too late. Poplar Fruit scolded in his heart. "You really don't want face when I'm giving you face." He originally wanted to stop, but the other party didn't let him go. He became angry. Poplar Fruit didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward and used his strength to block Liang Zizong's fist. He raised his palm and hit the back of Liang Zizong's arm. Liang Zizong didn't react because Poplar Fruit was too fast. Liang Zizong bent his arm and Poplar Fruit leaned forward. He bent his leg and twisted his body to elbow Liang Zizong. Although he held back his strength, the elbow still hit Liang Zizong's stomach. Liang Zizong directly knelt down and almost vomited last night's meal. A few of the younger martial artists quickly ran forward and helped Liang Zizong up. Although he got up, he still looked like he was in pain. In fact, not to mention Liang Zizong, anyone who was hit in the stomach by an elbow would also be unable to take it. Liang Zizong had only gone up for a few minutes before he lost again. The Guo family martial arts dojo people looked at each other. Finally, their eyes fell on the eldest senior brother, who was the best in martial arts. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor, greater than or equal to. Chapter 255. Senior brother, Shurdu said he'll be back in half an hour. The fierce-looking boxer called back and stood behind the senior brother. Okay, we'll deal with you and junior brother Fule later. Now, I'll deal with you and our martial arts school. The senior brother waved his hand, and the others stepped back. His hands were hanging down like claws, and then he raised his left leg and bent it slightly. With a shake of his waist, he swung his arms powerfully. With one palm forward and the other pressing down, he looked at Yangguo. His powerful aura seemed to transform into the sound of a tiger's roar as it pounced on Yangguo. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. He vaguely found the intent that he had been searching for so long in the senior brother's body. At this moment, he also assumed the Xing Yi fist starting position and began to exchange blows with each other. I don't know who you learned Xing Yi fist from, but your moves are very standard. It's a pity that you can't reach the next level, the senior brother said in a deep voice. The other juniors of the Xing Yi martial school looked at their eldest senior brother with admiration. Their hearts were filled with envy. In the entire school, only their master and their eldest senior brother had reached the realm of intent. They had already received so many awards that their hands went soft. Even if they worked hard, they still couldn't find the door. Today, they were able to observe the senior brother's kung fu at a close distance. It was a good opportunity to learn. Whether it's enough or not, we'll only know after we fight. Poplar Fruit smiled. Regardless of whether he could deal with Fu Lei and the others today, it was worth it to see him master. Take this, eldest senior brother warned, and rushed forward. Xing Yi fist's moves were mostly evolved by imitating the movements of animals pouncing on food or defending themselves. The moves were varied, and the combinations were even more unpredictable. The senior brother stepped forward, and his fists were like a green dragon or a snake. He moved from left to right and went straight for Poplar Fruit's neck. His aura changed as well. It changed from the majestic might of a tiger to the unfathomable hiss of a snake. Poplar Fruit's eyes were so sharp that he could see through his opponent's intentions. However, this was the first time they had exchanged blows, so he did not dare to take it head-on. Instead, he twisted his body and punched his opponent's forearm. This punch of his actually missed. Seeing Poplar Fruit's body move, eldest senior brother immediately changed his move. His right arm pressed down, and his left hand turned into a palm, chopping towards Poplar Fruit's ear. Due to the fact that this palm strike was hurried, the strength behind it wasn't great. However, due to the inertia of the body, if it were to hit, even if the other party didn't feel dizzy, the other party would still feel dizzy for a moment. Poplar Fruit raised his leg and lightly tapped the ground. Like a swallow, he turned around and dodged the attack. After standing still, eldest senior brother did not chase after him. He also steadied himself and sized up Poplar Fruit again. Poplar Fruit took 2 steps back and carefully observed his opponent. It seemed that there was a mistake in his judgment. Both of them had the same thought, especially Yangguo. At first, he thought that the eldest senior brother was at Yang Jingdong's level, but this judgment was wrong. He didn't know if the eldest senior brother's reaction speed had been trained in will, but it was faster than he thought. If he only used Xing Yi fist, it would be difficult to deal with him. Poplar Fruit thought to himself. However, he was not a person who would back down easily. The harder the opponent was to deal with, the more enthusiasm he would have to compete. Huh. Poplar Fruit rarely took the initiative to attack today. He did not hold back. Every punch he threw out was 70 to 80% of his strength. Under the speed of his punches, there was even a faint sound of thunder breaking through the air. Collapsing fist, horizontal fist, chopping fist, and collapsing fist again. Eldest senior brother's face was calm as he steadily parried. He did not show any weakness and continuously threw out hundreds of moves. Black dragon stirring pillar, step forward cross fist, fierce tiger pouncing on its prey, step forward drilling fist, step forward crushing fist, and turn around chopping fist. In fact, Poplar Fruit was much weaker when it came to Shingy Fist. Sometimes he would constantly retreat to block and then rely on his inhuman reaction speed to find an opening to counterattack. Later on, Poplar Fruit simply stopped blocking and took a punch. He felt that there was no problem, so he exchanged one punch for another. He would not let his opponent take advantage of him. This time, the two's punches really hit the flesh. In the empty space of the dojo, the sound of punching sandbags could be heard, and this time they were hitting the body. Hearing this, the girl at the front desk could not help but cry out in pain for them. Although Poplar Fruit was thin and weak, his muscles were actually very strong. With the internal strength circulating in his body, he would be fine even if he took a few more punches. After all, eldest senior brother's body was still that of an ordinary person. Under the bombardment of Poplar Fruit's heavy punches, he only felt a slight pain in his muscles at first, but then it became numb for a while. That was a good fight. After temporarily separating, Poplar Fruit excitedly patted his chest. Except for Meng Sanhua, he had never found an opponent who could fight with him like this. Again, as soon as he finished speaking, he went up to eldest senior brother again. Come on, eldest senior brother. Several pugilists from the martial arts club cheered for their eldest senior brother, and the students of the martial arts club gradually gathered around, mesmerized. The charm of martial arts was not only to cultivate one's body and mind. Most of the time, people liked martial arts and admired its violent aesthetics, although few people were willing to admit it. The fight between Poplar Fruit and eldest senior brother would inspire many martial arts enthusiasts. Eldest senior brother listened to the cheers of his juniors and felt bitter. He had never thought that Poplar Fruit would fight with his life on the line. A punch for a punch, a life for a life. This was not a war. Was there a need to fight like this? Eldest senior brother was hurt, so he did not want to continue wasting time with Poplar Fruit. He became energetic again and fought with Poplar Fruit using the body movement of Shingy Fist. Seeing eldest senior brother's rapid and agile movements, Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. He thought to himself, the body movement of Shingy Fist. This was probably a secret because Poplar Fruit had never found a detailed diagram of it before and had never practiced it. He was excited. As he fought, he diverted some of his attention to memorize and learn eldest senior brother's body movement. However, Shingy Fist's fighting style was still about fighting head-on. Although some styles were bold and powerful, some were compact and precise, and some were steady and solid, they were still the same. One could imagine that when two armies were fighting, the situation would be chaotic and enemies would be everywhere. How would there be any room for you to dodge and maneuver? If you did not advance, you would be pushed back. If you retreated, you would die. As the eldest senior brother dodged, his momentum weakened a lot. Only a few of the onlookers could see that the fist intent of the eldest senior brother was actually unable to raise its head under the pressure of Yonghua. In fact, Poplar Fruit did not press too hard. In order to learn the body movement of Shingy Fist, he even left some space for eldest senior brother. However, after he memorized the body movement, he realized that it was not as nimble and practical as his own Taiji Fist. Shingy Fist's body movement was used to supplement the body movement. It made the body movement difficult to predict. Using it for dodging was really bad. Chapter 256. The eldest senior apprentice brother was actually having a hard time defending himself. He didn't know where Poplar Fruit came from. He was clearly very young, and his Shingy Fist was clearly not very good, but he was so monstrous that he gave him a sense of defeat. This kind of feeling of defeat could only be felt by those experts who were invincible in the national competition. Could it be that this kid who came to provoke him was already so strong? If he lost again and again and couldn't even beat his eldest senior apprentice brother, wouldn't the Gua family martial arts school lose all its face? Looking around, he saw groups of students surrounding him. If he lost, how many students would he lose? The eldest senior apprentice brother suppressed the sense of defeat in his heart. A sense of responsibility for the future of the martial arts school was constantly rising in his chest. He couldn't back down anymore. He had to fight this guy to the death and protect the Gua family martial arts school's reputation. Just as his eyes were red and he was about to fight Poplar Fruit to the death, Poplar Fruit suddenly took a few big steps back. He didn't want to continue fighting with him. Yes, through observing his eldest senior apprentice brother's footwork, Poplar Fruit could clearly analyze that the stalker's footwork was definitely not something the Gua family martial arts school could compare with. They weren't from the same school. Poplar Fruit was a little doubtful of his own judgment. Moreover, even if it was really Fu Lei, the one Poplar Fruit should be fighting was Fu Lei, not the other fighters of the Gua family martial arts school who had nothing to do with him. After exchanging a few punches and kicks with his eldest senior apprentice brother, Poplar Fruit's hot-bloodedness subsided a lot, and his mind gradually calmed down. He also noticed that there was a large group of curious students watching from the side. He thought about what his eldest senior apprentice brother had just said. If he beat this eldest senior apprentice brother, it would be cutting off his source of income, and the Gua family martial arts school would definitely hate him to death. After calming down, Poplar Fruit decided not to compete. He wanted to win. If he won, it would just be a temporary satisfaction. If he took a step back, he might be able to see the world. He immediately retreated and pretended to stagger. After he steadied himself, he cupped his hands and said, "My skills are not good enough. Thank you for showing mercy, brother." Just now, when he fought with his eldest senior apprentice brother, few people could tell who was stronger and who was weaker. Most people thought that their eldest senior apprentice brother's kung fu was stronger and defeated the invader, Poplar Fruit, so they couldn't help but cheer. "Oh, eldest senior apprentice brother is mighty." The younger apprentice brother and brother, the younger apprentice brother, the younger apprentice brothers, the younger apprentice brother. Meanwhile, the surrounding students were all overjoyed and began to chatter amongst themselves. Their eldest senior brother had won against his opponent, so they also shared in the glory. It's Poplar, 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 Poplar. Among the internal martial arts masters who came with eldest senior brother, 2 or 3 of them were silent. They were actually quite strong. They could tell that eldest senior brother was in a perilous situation just now and was about to lose. They even broke out in cold sweat for eldest senior brother. But the situation suddenly changed. Poplar Fruit admitted defeat. Could it be that their eldest senior apprentice brother secretly used a big move? That's too ridiculous. Their eldest senior apprentice brother was also silent. Poplar Fruit's sudden retreat made him stunned. His brain almost stopped working. What was going on? Wasn't he about to lose? How did he become the one showing mercy? However, he was still their eldest senior apprentice brother. He was in charge of all the operations of the inner and outer dojo on behalf of his master. His brain wasn't bad. He quickly understood that Poplar Fruit was the one showing mercy. Their eldest senior apprentice brother didn't understand why he suddenly changed from being unreasonable to taking the initiative to concede. However, he recognized Poplar Fruit's favor. He didn't continue to attack Poplar Fruit. Instead, he looked deeply at Poplar Fruit and slowly turned around. He said to the surrounding students, all right, disperse. If there's nothing else, go back and continue your studies. Blackie, you juniors who are on duty today, bring them back to practice. Give me the 3 consecutive poplars seriously." "Yes, senior apprentice brother." Under the instructions of the inner dojo's martial arts masters, the students obediently went back to practice. Perhaps it was because they had seen a blood-boiling fight, but their enthusiasm for learning martial arts was very high. Their shouting was also much louder than usual. After dealing with the others, their eldest senior apprentice brother turned around and looked at Poplar Fruit. He said, "I am Guohong Jing, the 18th generation successor of the Gua family's Xing Yi Fist. Have you asked for guidance?" Poplar Fruit cupped his hands and said with a smile, "My name is Poplar Fruit. I originally learned Tai Chi. As for Xing Yi Fist, I'm not a successor. I've only practiced it by myself. Please give me some guidance. Guo Hongjing couldn't help but be shocked that he was so strong by himself. However, he didn't show it on his face. Guo Hongjing extended his hand and made an inviting gesture. He said, "Brother Yang, why don't we go to the second floor's inner dojo to talk? I'll get someone to urge junior apprentice Brother Fu Lei. If there's any conflict, we can discuss a solution." Okay. Poplar Fruit didn't act pretentious and readily agreed. The second floor wasn't as big as the first floor. Perhaps it was because there weren't many disciples in the inner dojo, but many places were built with rooms. Some were dormitories, some were dining halls, and some were living and entertainment areas. This dojo wasn't much different from a school. After going upstairs, they walked through a passage that led to two large practice fields. In the middle was a ring that was twice as big as an ordinary boxing ring. However, what attracted Poplar Fruit's eyes wasn't the rows of practice facilities, but the old man standing in the middle of the practice field. The old man stood there in the three postures, motionless. Although his hair was a little white, he gave Poplar Fruit a sense of pressure like a mountain. An expert. He's definitely an expert. Poplar Fruit was shocked. This aura was already somewhat restrained, but it was far stronger than Guo Hongjing's aura by 2 times. No, this couldn't even be called qi. It should be the so-called intent in Xing Yi Fist. The old man didn't move because of the row of footsteps. He continued to stand in his 3 postures, closed his eyes, and immersed himself in his own martial arts concept. The old man's intent wasn't like Guo Hongjing's, which could only be felt and couldn't be grasped. In Poplar Fruit's eyes, the old man's intent seemed to condense and take shape. It was like the veins of a leaf, clear to the touch. Is this intent? Poplar Fruit seemed to have opened a door in front of him, separated by a thin layer of fog, waiting for him to step in and explore. Poplar Fruit stood still. His eyes were open, but they were empty as if there was nothing there. He was trying to dispel the fog and deeply feel the intent that he hadn't been able to find since he started learning Xing Yi Fist. Guo Hongjing, who was walking in front, stopped as if he sensed something. He looked at Poplar Fruit and waved his hand, stopping the internal hall's boxing masters who were about to speak. He had experienced this before, so he knew that this was a sign of a breakthrough. Although it was hard to say whether Poplar Fruit was an enemy, he had just purposely stepped back to give Guo Hongjing a good impression. After thinking about it, he didn't deliberately interrupt Poplar Fruit's comprehension. This was the most important moment for a martial artist. If he interrupted, Poplar Fruit would definitely fight him to the death. New week, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendations greater than or equal to. Chapter 257. Poplar Fruit's aura was rising. The juniors who hadn't stepped into this realm couldn't feel it, but Guo Hongjing was keenly aware of it. If it was said that Poplar Fruit's aura at the beginning was like a small knife that hadn't been sharpened yet, then now, the rising aura of Poplar Fruit had gradually changed from a small knife to a sharp blade, and finally turned into a green dragon crescent blade. This was only a metaphor, but it was enough to show the current state of Poplar Fruit's majestic aura. However, Guo Hongjing could still sense that Poplar Fruit's aura was somewhat chaotic, and it still couldn't condense into a shape. It was still one step away from the realm of intent. The old man in the middle of the training field slowly opened his eyes. The intent on his body didn't withdraw, but continued to spread. He looked at the source of the aura, and when he saw Poplar Fruit's appearance, he was a little surprised. After silently observing for a moment, the old man said in a deep voice, "Intent, follow the heart. Use intent to receive qi. Use intent to manifest oneself." The old man's voice echoed in Poplar Fruit's mind like a bell. Poplar Fruit slowly closed his eyes and stood in the midst of his chaotic aura. Like a blade of grass swaying in the wind, his body also swayed slightly. Suddenly, his left leg took a small step forward, and his legs bent slightly. He clenched his hands in a fist and sank them down to his dantian. At this time, Guo Hongjing was surprised to find that Poplar Fruit's aura suddenly withdrew and no longer swayed carelessly. He didn't see the admiration in the old man's eyes. The old man had already withdrawn the 3 postures, dispersed the intent, and stood aside. This was the time for Poplar Fruit to comprehend by himself, and he couldn't do more. Poplar Fruit's movements were slow, and he began to perform the Xingyi fist in the air. Step forward, chop fist. Step forward, burst fist. Step backward, burst fist. Step forward, burst fist. Step backward, burst fist. Every move was slowly demonstrated like a beginner. However, Poplar Fruit was far superior to everyone else because his crotch was flat, his crotch was round, his knees were buckled, and his toes were grasping the ground like a tree taking root. Although every move was slow, the strength was steady. Guohongjing watched as Poplar Fruit demonstrated the moves of the Xingyi fist over and over again. He could no longer suppress the shock in his heart, and it was written all over his face. He opened his mouth slightly, not because he thought that there was anything special about the Poplar Fruit's moves, but because he realized that the Poplar Fruit's aura had condensed over and over again. The chop fist is like an axe, and it has the intention to chop things. The burst fist is like an arrow, and it has the intention to shoot things. The tiger form is like a fierce tiger, and it has the power to pounce and devour gods. The snake form is like a spirit snake, and it has the ability to move grass without disturbing it. The old man muttered softly in Guohongjing's ear. It was unclear whether he was instructing Poplar Fruit or Guohongjing. However, Guohongjing also seemed to have understood something, and he carefully observed Poplar Fruit's every move. The few martial artists of the Internal Martial Arts Hall who weren't smart enough to comprehend heard it, but they couldn't see any clues or figure out the mystery. Poplar Fruit's movements were getting slower and slower, but his aura was indeed getting more and more condensed. In the end, every punch was actually dripping a few drops of sweat on the ground. The martial artists of the Internal Martial Arts Hall were shocked to find that Poplar Fruit's seemingly slow fists gave them the illusion that they couldn't block them. The artistic conception has been formed. The artistic conception has been formed. The old man sighed softly at the side. He was already in his 60s this year and had lived for more than half a century. He had traveled extensively and seen many masters, but he had never seen a master of Xingyi martial arts who had broken through to the realm of intent at such a young age. For example, Guohongjing, his eldest disciple, who was also his younger brother's son, was already 37 this year. He had just entered the realm of intent less than 2 years ago. This was already considered good in an era where martial arts were declining. However, compared to Poplar Fruit, his realm of intent was not at the same level as Poplar Fruit's, who had just broken through to the realm of intent. If it was in ancient times, Yangguo would probably be a young genius whose name could shake a region. He didn't know which master had taught him. His vision was really enviable. He didn't know that Poplar Fruit had actually practiced martial arts for less than a year. If he knew, would he be so shocked that his jaw would drop to the ground? Poplar Fruit also felt that he had already reached a higher level. He had officially entered the palace of Xingyi martial arts. It was not wrong to say that he had achieved a small success in Xingyi martial arts. As for a large success, he could also look forward to it. So this is intent. When Poplar Fruit reached the end of his practice, he had already left the state of enlightenment. It was as if he was playing with a new toy. He changed his intent along with his body. The tiger fist was like a fierce tiger descending the mountain, and the monkey fist was like a cunning monkey. As he played, Poplar Fruit suddenly had an idea. He tried to apply the Tai Chi breath-holding technique. For a moment, his intent was completely restrained. It only condensed in front of his body and did not spread out. It was actually somewhat similar to what the old man had done. As for the internal hall boxers, they suddenly felt that the pressure had been greatly reduced. They could finally take a breather. At this time, the old man was also unable to remain calm. He opened his eyes wide and stared straight at Poplar Fruit. He muttered, "Grandmaster, Grandmaster." Guohongjing looked at his master in astonishment and asked, "What? Master, you're saying that he's already a Grandmaster?" He couldn't help but be surprised because he knew that his master had not reached the Grandmaster realm. "No, I'm saying that he has the talent of a Grandmaster. In less than 10 years, he will definitely become a Grandmaster." The old man shook his head and said in a low voice. In his tone, there was a trace of admiration and admiration. Knowing that now was not the time for him to study, Poplar Fruit withdrew his aura and moves. He slowly stood up. Unknowingly, he was already sweating profusely. "I'm Poplar Fruit. Thank you for your generosity, Master." Although he had just had an argument with the old man's disciple, Poplar Fruit still bowed respectfully to the old man. Without his guidance, he really didn't know how long he would have to wait for his breakthrough. You're too polite. There are fewer and fewer people learning martial arts nowadays. If we continue to hide it, we'll bring the good kung fu of our country to the grave. The old man chuckled. "Moreover, I didn't teach you much. Your intent is all based on your own understanding." If he didn't believe it, he could tell just by looking at his few silly disciples. "I haven't asked for your name, Master," Poplar Fruit asked respectfully. "This old man's surname is Guo, and his first name is Chong. Which master's disciple are you?" "Who knows? I might even know your master." Old man Guochong asked curiously. "Me? I don't have a master." Poplar Fruit smiled embarrassedly. "I used to learn Tai Chi from an ancient book. Now I'm learning Xingyi Fist by watching other people's videos and some information on the internet. It's just that I haven't been able to practice intent before. It's all thanks to Master Guo's good guidance." "You practiced it yourself?" Old man Guochong's eyes widened and asked in surprise. Guo Hongjing already wanted to cover his face. It was too uncomfortable. If someone could practice it so well by themselves, he would have lived like a dog for the past 30 or 40 years. Chapter 258. "By the way, are you Xiaojing's friend?" Grandfather Guochong asked curiously. "How come I've never heard Xiaojing mention you before?" This time, Yang Guo was embarrassed. Don't look at how they look like father and son now. Just now, they were fighting fiercely with other people's disciples downstairs. What should he say? Should he say that he was here to challenge them? Of course, he wasn't here to challenge them, but he was so impulsive just now that it was no different from challenging them. At this time, Guo Hongjing came up and respectfully reported the situation to the old man. Guo Hongjing didn't exaggerate, nor did he make wild guesses. He just told him what he knew and saw. Grandfather Guochong frowned at first, but when he heard that Poplar Fruit was merciful and took the initiative to show mercy, he eased up. At this time, he looked at Yang Guo. He didn't have the kindness he had when he was talking to a junior. Instead, he became serious. He cupped his hands and said, "Mr. Yang, please show mercy. This old man thanks you in advance." Poplar Fruit quickly waved his hand and said, "Master Guo, don't call me Mr. Yang. Just call me Little Yang. A teacher for a day, a father for life." Although it didn't reach such an exaggerated degree, Grandfather Guochong's guidance, just now, was still worthy of Poplar Fruit's respect. Besides, he was also a senior in Xingyi martial arts. It was reasonable for him to be a junior. "Little Yang," Grandfather Guochong hesitated and asked, "I don't think you are an unreasonable person. What did my disciple do to make you so angry? Can you tell this old man, so we can discuss a solution?" In fact, Grandfather Guochong was a little too polite when facing Poplar Fruit. He was also the master of a big martial arts club and also had a little reputation in the martial arts world. Logically speaking, when facing a young man, he should have a little restraint and prestige of an elder. But Poplar Fruit couldn't be measured by common sense. A person who might be a master in the future, he didn't dare to neglect. If he could solve it peacefully, it was better not to cause conflict. It would be best if he could establish a good relationship with him. Perhaps in the future, the dojo would need his help. The two of them sat down. Poplar Fruit pondered for a while and decided to talk to Guochong about the grudge between them. Of course, the story started from the incident at the hot pot restaurant. Before Yang Guo could finish saying that they were going to fight outside, Guochong's grandfather was already fuming. He slammed his palm on the square table. The ceramic tea set on the table jumped up with a clang. Some were upside down, some were tilted askew, and some were almost broken. This was the real personality of Guochong. In reality, regardless of whether or not they cultivated their body and mind, as long as they practiced Xingyi martial arts, under the influence of Xingyi martial arts, which was straightforward and fierce, they would have a violent temper. There was a saying in the Xingyi martial arts, "Rise like the wind, fall like an arrow." Beating someone down is too slow. People who were not impatient might not be able to master the Xing martial arts. How dare you? How can a martial artist be so cruel to women and children? Guo Chang's eyes were spitting fire. He clenched his fist and was about to hit the table again. Master, I'm back. Who's looking for me? Fu Lei's voice came from the passageway. Unfortunately, he came just in time to see Guo Chang lose his temper. Fu Lei! Guo Chang glared at Fu Lei, who had just walked in, and scolded. Kneel down. Ah? Fu Lei saw Poplar Fruit turn around and realized that something was wrong. His legs went soft, and he quickly knelt down. Did you hit someone else's child? Guo Chang's eyes were burning. He walked in front of Fu Lei and asked harshly. No. Poplar Fruit didn't want to frame him. He just said what he wanted to say. Master Guo. He wasn't the one who hit the child. It was a man with a crew cut who was also wearing the dojo's uniform. Tell me who did it. Guo Chang pointed at Fu Lei and asked. Master, it really wasn't me. When the child bumped into Ying, he hit him without thinking. Fu Lei cried out. Who's Ying? Guo Chang asked harshly. He's a student in my class. He paid the annual fee. Fu Lei said in a low voice. Withdraw. Tell him that Guo Family Dojo doesn't welcome people who bully women and children to practice martial arts. Guo Chang said, and you? I'll deal with you after I understand the situation. Master, I was wrong, Fu Lei said with a sad face. He looked at Poplar Fruit and gritted his teeth. He didn't dare to lose his temper in front of his master. He just asked gloomily, Brother, it's been so long. You also taught us a lesson that day. Why are you still so unforgiving? Am I the one who's unforgiving, or are you the one who's unforgiving? When Yangguo heard this, he got angry again. He stood up from the chair, pointed at Fu Lei, and said, When I let you go that day, I didn't want to pursue the matter with you. But you still found a group of bikers to chase after us. Fortunately, the police came quickly. Okay, I said I didn't lose anything. After that, you didn't trouble me again, so I let you go again. Poplar Fruit took out a photo from his pocket and threw it in front of Fu Lei. But you didn't stop. You couldn't beat me in a fight, so you took photos of me. My life has been ruined by you. Wait a minute. Fu Lei felt that something was wrong. He interrupted Poplar Fruit and asked, Let's talk about it one by one. We were wrong to hit the child in the hot pot restaurant. I'll admit it no matter if you beat me or scold me. But what do you mean by biker gang? Wasn't it you who called them? Poplar Fruit asked. We just walked back to the hot pot restaurant, and a group of bald men on motorcycles came looking for me. If it wasn't you, who else could it be? It really wasn't us. Fu Lei cried out. Master, please investigate. At that time, Ying said he was looking for someone to take revenge. I stopped him and told him to forget about it. We walked back together that day, and I didn't see anyone call on the road. How could they call someone so quickly? Besides, Ying is just a student. How could he know a biker gang? You didn't look for anyone. Poplar Fruit frowned and stared into Fu Lei's eyes. Did you come back later? No. Fu Lei's aggrieved expression didn't seem to be fake. What about this photo? Poplar Fruit asked. He began to believe what Fu Lei said. But if it wasn't Fu Lei, who called the bikers? This photo? Fu Lei picked up the photo, looked at it, and said, I don't know what's going on. I really don't know if Ying and others were involved in this matter privately. But I absolutely didn't participate in this matter. I swear. He raised 3 fingers and said, If I have half a lie, may I be struck by lightning. Everyone, use your votes to buy tickets for the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 259. I've seen the person who took the photos. He was wearing a cap, and it was about the same height as you. He was about 30 years old. His martial arts were average, but he was very good. When he escaped, he jumped over the wall in a few steps. Poplar Fruit said to Fu Lei, Do you know if he knew such a person? I don't know. Fu Lei shook his head. He hesitated for a moment and said, I'm not trying to make excuses for Ying. In the past few months, I haven't seen Ying mention you. Intuitively, I don't think it's possible that Ying did it. Maybe it was the mastermind behind the street racer gang's incident. Wait a minute. At this time, Guo Hongjing, who had been silent all this time, came up and asked, Poplar Fruit, the person you said had good movement skills. Did he have an aquiline nose, a pale face, and a drunken voice? Yang Guo took Guo Hongjing's description and compared it with the image in her mind. She nodded and said, "He didn't talk to me, but his nose is indeed hooked, and his skin is indeed a little white." "Xiaojing, do you know something?" Old man Guochong asked in a deep voice. Guo Hongjing respectfully said to Old man Guochong, "Master, I do know of such a person. You also know that after I took over the management of the museum, I often had to deal with people outside. In Yangcheng, or in our Guangdong province, there is a small sect called the 8 Steps Meteor Kick. Their martial arts are not very good, but they are good at movement skills." Guo Hongjing said, "Yes, I've heard of this sect before, but those disciples seem to have been sacrificed in the war against the law." Old man Guochong recalled and said, "In fact, not all of them were sacrificed." Guo Hongjing said, "I only heard about it recently. A person came back with a broken leg and left a seed for their sect. Of course, they haven't recovered yet, so it's normal that Master hasn't heard of them." "So, you said that person is from the 8 Steps Meteor Kick sect?" Poplar Fruit asked. Guo Hongjing nodded and said, "If the person you're talking about is the same person as the one I'm talking about, then yes. Last year, I heard from others that there's only one person left in the sect. That person didn't practice martial arts properly and ran off to become a private investigator." Speaking of which, Guo Hongjing also sighed. "It must be him." Poplar Fruit was excited and said, "His equipment is very professional. It must be him. What's his name? Where do you live?" "I don't know where he lives, but I know his name. His surname is Che, and his name is Che Yuan," Guo Hongjing said. Stone. At this time, Guochong had calmed down a lot. Fu Lei also called him by his nickname. He ordered, "You call Poplar Fruit," and asking whether he did this. Now, Guochong was selling Poplar Fruit a favor. "Yes," Fu Lei said respectfully. "I'll go make the call now." Fu Lei came back after making the call. Sure enough, this matter had nothing to do with them. This made Poplar Fruit feel very guilty. He began to reflect on whether he was a little too irritable. He didn't ask clearly, but he almost destroyed the martial arts center. Guochong took a square ruler from the altar. It was as long as a sword. Although it was made of iron, it was shiny and new. It was unknown whether it was often played with. Seeing the old man's action, Fu Lei's legs trembled. "Stone, give me your hand." "Two." Guochong's voice was not loud, but it revealed a power that made people not dare to resist. As a martial arts center master, you don't punish evil and promote good. You let your students bully the weak. According to the rules of our sect, you'll be punished with 50 rulers. Guochong didn't mention the martial arts center at this time, but the sect. This showed that it was not just a matter of the martial arts center's reputation. Fu Lei's face was sad. He knelt down and held his palms high. His whole body was trembling. "Pa!" Guochong swung the ruler and hit it down. Fu Lei's right palm quickly swelled up, and a red mark appeared. Fu Lei didn't dare to scream. He clenched his teeth, and the pain made his facial muscles twist. He really hit him. Poplar Fruit watched in surprise. "Pa!" Another feral hit, and Fu Lei's left palm also swelled up. With 50 rulers, wouldn't these two palms be crippled? Poplar Fruit watched in fear. He didn't expect the sect's rules to be so strict. After so many years, corporal punishment still existed. Was this the power of tradition? Fu Lei didn't dare to beg for mercy, let alone resist. In the novels, it was said that in traditional sects, the master's dignity was even higher than the father's. Poplar Fruit had seen it for himself. "Pa!" Fu Lei couldn't bear it anymore. He opened his mouth and screamed. Before the echoes of Fu Lei's screams died down, Guochong raised his ruler again. He closed his eyes, preparing for another wave of pain. "Master Guo, wait!" Poplar Fruit suddenly moved. He held Guochong's hand and squeezed between the two with a wry smile. "Wait!" Fu Lei was pushed to the ground by Poplar Fruit's butt. He quickly clamped his swollen hand with his legs and sucked in a breath of cold air. "Master Guo, I think you should just hit him a few times. Fu Lei didn't make too big of a mistake. After your teachings, I think he will change." Yang Guo continued to hold Guochong's hand and didn't let go. "Little Yang, Are you going to plead for him? Guicheng looked at Poplar Fruit and asked. Although Fu Lei was rolling on the ground, he still heard Poplar Fruit's words clearly. His eyes were wide open. Poplar Fruit still spoke for him. It was unbelievable. It was Poplar Fruit who came to denounce him. Yang Gua smiled. That's right, Master Gua. Fu Lei's nature isn't bad. I heard from him that he even helped me restrain A Ying. The conflict between us was, to a large extent, a misunderstanding on my part. Now that we've cleared things up, there's no need to make a big fuss. Guicheng looked at Poplar Fruit's sincere eyes. He slowly withdrew his right hand and the ruler from Poplar Fruit's loosened hand. He gently placed the ruler on the square table next to him. Then he flung his clothes and sat down on the armchair. After a long time, he slowly said, Little Shirtu, since Little Yang spoke for you, then you won't be punished with the ruler. However, when you go back, copy the sect rules 20 times. People who learn martial arts must not bully the weak, forget righteousness for profit, and be unfilial. The next time you do this, not only will you be beaten, your legs will be broken, and you will be expelled from the sect. Do you hear me? Guicheng suddenly changed his tone and shouted sternly. This disciple will remember. At this time, the pain in Fu Lei's hand subsided. He quickly got up from the ground and respectfully bowed to his master. Chapter 260. Well, you can leave now. Guicheng waved his hand and drove Fu Lei away. Guicheng's grandfather probably didn't want to see him for the time, after being upset by such a thing. When Fu Lei turned to leave, he looked at Poplar Fruit with gratitude in his eyes. This person was also interesting. Because of a misunderstanding, Yang came to his door and caused him to suffer physical pain, but he did not hold a grudge. Instead, when Yang helped him speak up, he was grateful to the point of shedding tears. Poplar Fruit, do you want me to ask my friends in Jianghu to make an appointment with Chen Yuan? After Fu Lei left, Guohongjing took the initiative to talk to Poplar Fruit. Oh, no need. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and smiled. It's easy to know his name. I can find his address. In fact, he didn't want to alert the enemy. From his last encounter with Chen Yuan, he knew that Chen Yuan was very cunning and slippery like a loach. If he knew something, he might slip away or hide immediately. In that case, Poplar Fruit would never be able to find him. After chatting for a while, Yang stood up and cupped his fist to Guicheng and Guohongjing. Master Gua, Brother Gua, it's time for me to leave. Today's conflict with your club was mainly due to a misunderstanding. I feel very ashamed, and I am very grateful for Master Gua's guidance and justice. You don't have to be so polite. Guicheng laughed. Even without me, it's only a matter of time before you make a breakthrough in Xingyi boxing. Moreover, I guess that the Taiji fist you learned is also very unusual. You can defeat Xiaojing without using your artistic conception. You are already very strong. Guohongjing also stood up and shook hands with Poplar Fruit with a smile. Let bygones be bygones. We didn't know each other until we fought. If you have time, come to my school more often. I'm old and often can't find someone to practice martial arts with. Okay. Poplar Fruit also said straightforwardly, I also often can't find someone to practice martial arts with. I'll definitely come and disturb you in the future. Guohongjing sent Yang Gua out of the carriage and smiled. Yang Gua, if you need anything from Chen Yuan, just let us know. We're the owners of dojos, so we know a lot of seniors in the underworld. We can still put in a few words for him. Poplar Fruit held Guohongjing's hand and patted his shoulder. He smiled and said, I should be able to solve it. If I can't, I'll come to you for help. Thank you. After driving far away, Poplar Fruit's mind still clearly flashed with the surprised eyes of the girl at the front desk. Yes, they were fighting like mortal enemies just now, but when they turned around, they put their arms around each other's shoulders as if they were old friends for many years. Poplar Fruit didn't believe that he and the Gua family martial arts school were like old friends when they met. He was very clear in his heart that this was all because of his strength. If he hadn't broken through to the artistic conception, or if he was just an ordinary person who came to ask for an explanation, would he still be treated like this? Perhaps Guicheng's grandfather would help him uphold justice because of his martial arts ethics. However, he would definitely not be as harmonious and even a little flattering as before. To put it bluntly, the domain of martial artists was still a world where the strong were respected. If you didn't want to be bullied, you had to be strong first. In fact, this principle also applied to all kinds of experiences in life. While he was daydreaming, the familiar bell of Sky City suddenly sounded from the armrest. Poplar Fruit didn't look down. He focused on driving and then reached out to press the green box on the car screen. "Hello, Poplar Fruit?" Fong Beibei's voice immediately sounded from the car's speaker. Because there was no one in the car and he didn't wear a Bluetooth headset, the sound of the phone was directly played through the speaker through Bluetooth. "Beibei?" Poplar Fruit pressed the horn to signal the car in front to drive faster. He then asked in confusion, "Why did you call?" "Kiki, what's the matter?" "Nothing." "I just wanted to ask you, why aren't you back yet?" Fong Beibei laughed and said. From the speaker, there were 2 barks from Gold. "Don't bark." Fong Beibei didn't put down the phone. Her slippers clattered as she ran over and gently kicked Gold. "Do you understand disturbing people?" Poplar Fruit paid attention to her and Gold's voices and forgot to answer. So Fong Beibei continued to ask, "Are you not done yet?" "Oh no, I'm done. I'll be back in 10-20 minutes or so." Poplar Fruit looked at the road sign and answered while steering the wheel. "Let me tell you, I asked Kiki to draw today." Fong Beibei said proudly. "GG." Kiki's childish voice was suddenly mixed in with the sound. He didn't know if she found out that Fong Beibei was talking to the phone. "Wait," Fong Beibei said. "I'll turn on the speaker and let Kiki talk to you." Poplar Fruit only heard that the sound from the speaker was a little noisy. "Kiki." Fong Beibei's voice was a little further away. "Poplar Fruit is calling, say hello." After waiting for a while, Poplar Fruit heard Kiki's childish voice ask, "Who is it?" The image of Kiki, tilting her head and looking at the phone in confusion, appeared in his mind. Poplar Fruit almost couldn't help but laugh and drive the car into a ditch. "Kiki?" Poplar Fruit finally spoke first. Kiki didn't say anything. Poplar Fruit continued, "Why? Don't you remember Dad's voice?" "Huh?" Kiki suddenly shouted happily, and then loudly shouted 2 words, not Dad, but Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit's face darkened and said, "Kiki, you have to call me Dad." "Huh?" Fong Beibei's laughter came. It was so presumptuous, as if she had just completed a prank. "Papa." Kiki finally changed the way she addressed Fong Beibei. She also giggled. "Fong Beibei." Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and scolded. "Kiki has been led astray by you." Fong Beibei turned off the speaker at this time and said with a weak smile, "I didn't teach her. She obviously called me Dad." "Is it?" Fong Beibei suddenly moved away from the microphone and said, "Poplar Fruit." "Poplar Fruit." Kiki's loud voice could be heard by Poplar Fruit, even though it was so far away. Fong Beibei laughed and said, "Did you see?" Poplar Fruit was helpless with the 2 of them. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Well, have you eaten? Do you want me to bring some back?" Looking at the sky, it was almost evening. "Are you in the car?" Fong Beibei carefully listened to the movements around Poplar Fruit and said, "I haven't eaten yet, but it doesn't matter. You can come back directly. I bought vegetables yesterday and put them in the fridge. I'll cook later. Drive carefully. I won't talk anymore." "Okay." Poplar Fruit also hung up the phone, opening the window and letting the natural wind blow in. Poplar Fruit didn't know why, but he wanted to go back to that warm little nest as soon as possible as he looked at the gradually crowded traffic in front of him. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Please use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 261. The car drove to the school and found a parking space to park. Yongguo was not in a hurry to get out of the car. He picked up his phone and dialed Song Jiwin's number. "Hello? What are you looking for me for?" Song Jiwin said in a strange tone. "You're not at home, and you don't have anything to eat. Why are you looking for me?" "Don't talk nonsense. Help me investigate someone," Poplar Fruit said. "Don't you have a lot of childhood friends in the public security system? Help me investigate someone called Che Jiwin. You just need his current address." "Che what?" Song Jiwin held the phone in his neck and his hands searched the coffee table and the table. He finally found a pen and paper. Speak slowly. Che Juan. Che as in car, June as in handsome. Poplar fruit explained to Song Jiwen word by word. Who's here? Song Jiwen mumbled as he wrote. Seems like he has quite a temper. Did he offend you? Or did he not touch your car? No. Poplar fruit paused and explained to Song Jiwen. I suspect that he has something to do with Xu Etching becoming like this. What's going on? Song Jiwen jumped up, leaned in front of the phone, and whispered, Duan Xu Etching's man? So he's ignoring us? Ah, what's going on? Poplar fruit was stunned and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Poplar fruit hesitated and simply told Song Jiwen what had happened. It's not that. He might be the one who was secretly following me, so I'm looking for him. I knew it. Song Jiwen said proudly. I said that Duan Xueqing was interested in you, but you denied it. Now that you're hooking up with someone else, she must be jealous. What do you mean hooking up? Poplar fruit leaned his head against the back of the driver's seat, rolled his eyes, and said, He's also a friend of mine. Also, help me think of a way to deal with Xu Etching. I really treat her as a good friend. I don't know how to get along with her now. This is really a headache. Song Jiwen also scratched his head. He rolled his eyes and said, Why don't you cook something delicious to bribe me? I haven't eaten yet. Who knows? Maybe I'll be inspired after I'm full. Let's order takeout. Pizza Hut's takeout number is XXXXX8. It only costs $3.80s. Bring home the good food. Poplar fruit casually made up a series of numbers and said with a smile, Well, if you have time, help me check this guy's address and help me figure out how to deal with this matter. I won't go back today. Not coming back again? Are you really hiding a mistress outside? Song Jiwen said twice, and the phone beeped with a busy tone. He muttered, Fuck, okay, I'm going to be hungry again. Back at the apartment, Poplar fruit had just opened the door when he heard Fong Beibei's happy singing. He felt something under his feet. Looking down, he saw Goldie's little head under the door frame. Poplar fruit rubbed its head, took off his shoes, and walked in. Probably because the fire was a little loud, she didn't notice Poplar fruit opening the door. Poplar fruit accidentally saw her humming while twisting her, but left and right. Ha! Poplar fruit couldn't help but laugh. Papa! Kiki was still intoxicated by Fong Beibei's singing at first, but when she heard her father's laughter, she eagerly pushed the baby walker and pounced on her father. Uncle! Fong Beibei raised her head and shouted with shame and annoyance. Why didn't you say anything when you came back? Poplar fruit took his daughter out of the baby walker, raised her small hand, and said with a smile, I promise, I didn't see anything. What electric hip dance? What twisting skill? Those are all illusions. You're still talking. Fong Beibei angrily stomped her feet and said with dissatisfaction, Okay, I want to talk about it. Poplar fruit finally held back his laughter and said, Let me see. What dishes did you make? Poplar fruit walked into the kitchen with Kiki in his arms. He looked at the several dishes next to the stove, looked into the pot, and counted celery tofu, green melon, red radish, corn kernels, good, very good, tomatoes, scrambled eggs. He suddenly raised his head and asked in confusion, Why are they all vegetarian? Where's the meat? Here. Fong Beibei blinked her eyes, then pointed at the hot pot and said, Eggs, isn't this a meat dish? Poplar fruit's face turned green. These are all vegetarian dishes. What do you mean eggs are a meat dish? Eggs, get out of the meat dish world. For a carnivore like him, it's simply impossible to not have meat. This meal, can he still eat? Okay. Being stared at by Poplar fruit, Fong Beibei finally lowered her head and said with shame, I used up all the meat yesterday and forgot to buy more. Forget to buy. It's better than being like Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing rarely eats greasy dishes. Even meat rarely can almost be considered as a vegetarian. Poplar fruit didn't continue to blame too much. He comforted. It's okay. It's not a big deal to not have meat to eat a meal. I think the dishes you cooked are very fragrant. Today must be a good day. Really? Fong Beibei asked somewhat happily. She picked up a small spoon, scooped up a spoonful of carrot corn kernels, raised her hand to Poplar fruit, and said, Try it. Poplar fruit lowered his head, moved his mouth closer to eat the food in the spoon, tasted it, nodded, and praised. It's delicious. It tastes good. Really? Fong Bebe looked at Poplar Fruit with her big eyes and asked. Really? Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He was not lying through his teeth. Fong Bebe's dishes are not very good, but the color and taste are not bad. It already meets the standard of home-cooked dishes. And the dishes are cooked so beautifully. It took a lot of effort to cut the carrots, right? Poplar Fruit asked while holding Kiki. Kiki opened her mouth and looked at Fong Bebe expectantly. She also wanted to taste it, but Fong Bebe did not give it to her. Kiki is too young to eat these things. Well, it's quite troublesome. After being praised, Fong Bebe said with joy, I learned the recipe from my mother. I added some oyster sauce. Keep up the good work. But Poplar Fruit reminded, the tomato scrambled eggs can be taken out of the pot. If you continue to cook, the juice will dry up. Oh, it's all your fault. You keep talking to me. Fong Bebe quickly turned off the fire and a little hurriedly poured the vegetables in the pot into the wash dishes. Don't stand there and make sarcastic remarks. Hurry and help wash the dishes. The rice is already cooked. We can eat it soon. Poplar Fruit smiled and put Kiki, who was struggling to get down to play with Goldie, back into the baby walker, rolled up his sleeves, and went back to the kitchen to help. The kitchen was filled with a thin layer of white smoke. The stove fire had just been extinguished, and the surrounding temperature was still very warm. Poplar Fruit and Fong Bebe did not speak again. Only the sound of flowing water and the clear sound of pots and ladles colliding played in the kitchen, like a beautiful country song, lingering and intoxicating. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 262. That night, because Poplar Fruit had come back, Fong Bebe went back to the dormitory to sleep. Poplar Fruit took out his laptop to prepare for the meeting that Yao Dehua had mentioned. He didn't get into bed until 2:00 in the morning. In fact, Poplar Fruit was already very tired. The breakthrough in his artistic conception not only consumed a lot of his physical strength, but also affected his mental state. If Fong Bebe hadn't asked him to accompany her to the stray dog rescue station tomorrow, which was Saturday, Poplar Fruit would have already climbed into bed and fallen asleep. So in order not to delay things, Poplar Fruit exhausted himself. In the middle of the night, he closed his eyes and groped his way into the bedroom, then threw himself directly on the bed. Poplar Fruit's huge body fell on the bed with a bang. Then, something fluffy bounced up and flew onto Poplar Fruit's face. Woof! Goldie was also sleeping. Suddenly, it jumped up, and it was so scared that it kicked its limbs on Poplar Fruit's face. Fuck! Yonghua squinted her eyes and pushed Goldie, who was almost frightened out of its wits, off the bed. This idiot, I've only been away for half a month and Fong Bebe has raised it. It even dares to climb onto the bed to sleep? Although Fong Bebe had bathed it in Kiki before she left, this kind of action was not allowed. In Poplar Fruit's hometown, domestic dogs were not allowed to enter the house. Ah Fu sometimes sneaked in. If it came in, the owner would definitely chase it out with a broom. Goldie was thrown on the ground. It struggled for a while, but its head was still a little confused. It felt the surrounding environment and felt that something was wrong. It jumped onto the bed again. Before it could proudly step on the soft quilt to find a place to sleep, a big hand suddenly waved over, and Goldie rolled back onto the bed. Woof woof! Goldie barked twice, as if it was protesting against Poplar Fruit's barbarity. Then it jumped onto the bed again, pushed down, barked twice, and came up again. Goldie seemed to have the tenacity to not let go of the mountain, and it insisted on jumping onto the bed. Poplar Fruit was finally impatient, and Goldie's barking was not a good thing. If it kept barking, Kiki would wake up. Okay. Poplar Fruit turned over and lay in the middle of the bed, muttering, Go to sleep if you wanna. I'll teach you a lesson tomorrow. Although Poplar Fruit occupied most of the bed, Goldie's permission, it was still satisfied. It stepped on the bed twice, then curled up and laid down on the hole it had made. The next day, Poplar Fruit woke up early with full health. He looked back at Goldie, who was lying on its back, and wondered if it was dreaming because its 4 little feet were randomly moving around. You don't even know if you're naked. Poplar Fruit pointed at the little guy, and a smile bloomed on his face. Forget it, I won't argue with it. Isn't it just climbing onto the bed and sleeping together? Poplar Fruit practiced 2 sets of boxing at home, but because the space was a little narrow, Poplar Fruit couldn't fully use it. But it didn't matter because Poplar Fruit didn't plan to practice this morning. He practiced 2 sets of boxing just to consolidate the will state from yesterday. Let's go to Citibank first, Fong Bebe said to Poplar Fruit as she got in the car and fastened her seatbelt. Bebe! Kiki's cheerful voice came from behind. She was fixed in the baby's safety seat in the back seat by Poplar Fruit. When she saw Fong Bebe, she waved her hands and greeted her. Bye. Fong Bebe turned her head and smiled at Kiki. Kiki, good morning. Be a good girl and sit in the back. It's not safe in the front. Oh, Goldie is here too. Fong Bebe looked down and saw Goldie jumping around in the back seat. She smiled and waved her hand. Why are we going to Citibank? Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. To withdraw money. Fong Bebe shook the bank card Poplar Fruit gave her yesterday and said, withdraw 200,000 yuan and donate it to the relief center. Mijin? Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. No. Fong Bebe shook her head and said, RMB. Isn't 200,000 yuan too little? Poplar Fruit started the car and asked, how about I add 800,000 yuan, and we'll have 1 million yuan to donate? What are you doing? Fong Bebe glanced at him and said, do you think I'm reluctant to donate? Without waiting for Poplar Fruit to speak, Fong Bebe explained, that's because Grandma Lu said that the relief center can't accept large donations. Is it because you're afraid that someone will create hype? Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. No, we're not afraid of hype, as long as it's good for the dogs. Fong Bebe shook her head and said, that's because the relief center doesn't need so much money, and it doesn't need to expand the scale of the relief center. It turned out that the couple, Zhang Guangda and Grandma Lu, who founded the relief center, knew better than anyone else that the relief center was actually a double-edged sword for those dogs. Think about it. Although we help a lot of poor dogs on the street, it will also make more people misunderstand. They will think that it's not a big deal to abandon their pets, because there are relief centers there to help take care of them. Fong Bebe turned around and said to Poplar Fruit very seriously, you don't know, but once, after the newspaper reported that the relief center's intake had greatly increased, many people went directly to the relief center and asked Uncle to take their pets. Although many people would abandon their pets regardless of whether there is an aid station or not, there are still some people who are hesitant. On one hand, they think about their heavy burden, and on the other hand, they think that it's immoral to abandon their good companions. However, with the aid station as an additional option, they don't even have the slightest mental struggle. Fong Bebe sighed. Poplar Fruit was silent. Fong Bebe's words reminded him of a report about the Baby Safety Island, which was actually the island for abandoned babies, that he had seen some time ago. The main purpose of such a kind measure was to increase the survival rate of abandoned babies and ensure the safety of abandoned babies. However, wasn't this also a covert condoning of the abandonment of babies? So, an appropriate amount of donation is a form of compassion. If you go beyond this limit, you'll turn a good thing into a bad thing, Fong Bebe said with some sadness. A small stream flows a long stream. Poplar Fruit comforted her. Now that you have so much money, you can slowly do the public welfare that you wanted to do before, and you can do it for a long time. That's right. Poplar Fruit laughed. You can't leave me behind. We agreed to go together. How did it become you donating alone? No way, I'll take half of it. Fong Bebe's mood improved a little. She raised her head proudly and laughed. You're kind. That's right. After knowing you for so long, all the strange uncles have been influenced by you to become good people. Poplar Fruit glanced at Fong Bebe's beautiful face from the rearview mirror and laughed. Good people are also strange uncles. Chapter 263. They didn't manage to go to Citibank. In the end, they went to one of the 4 big banks in China. This was Poplar Fruit's suggestion. Citibank didn't have many branches. There were only a few in the downtown area of Yangcheng. They couldn't find any in remote areas. Uncle Da and the others were old, so they should be more used to local banks. Fong Bebe sat in the front passenger seat and looked at the scenery outside the window. She suddenly turned her head and said to Yonghua, "Uncle, you spent a lot of money to buy this car, right?" Poplar Fruit's heart skipped a beat. Not good, but he still answered honestly, "Luckily, someone recommended it to me. It's a lot cheaper than the market price." "It's a lot cheaper, but it's still $1 million." Fong Beibei seriously counted with her fingers and said to Poplar Fruit, "Other than being big, cool, and satisfying your vanity, what else can you do with this foreign car? What's the difference between it and a domestic car that costs $100,000? Poplar Fruit focused on driving. Even though his EQ was low and he had a lot to say, he still vaguely felt that it was irrational to argue with Fong Beibei at this time. Fong Beibei continued, "Look, my dad bought a BYD in 2005. It's almost 10 years old now, but isn't it still very happy on the road? So foreign cars are just famous, but in essence, there's no difference between them and our domestic cars. You spent a lot of money to support them." Poplar Fruit kept ridiculing Fong Beibei in his heart. On the surface, he still smiled and nodded. Fong Beibei was very happy to see him act like a good student. Under Fong Beibei's nagging, Poplar Fruit and the others finally arrived at the aid station. Fong Beibei happily ran down to find Uncle Da and Grandma Lu. Poplar Fruit carried Kiki and followed behind. As for Goldie, it couldn't hold back anymore. As soon as it got out of the car, it ran around Poplar Fruit and the others happily. She guessed that Goldie had just been born at that time, and it was too small. This time, it didn't seem to have any homesickness or familiarity. Fong Beibei and Poplar Fruit's donation made the two elders very happy. They took out a red merit book and wrote it down for Poplar Fruit and the others. The merit book didn't say how much money one had to donate before it could be written down. Even if one donated a few hundred or tens of dollars, the old man would still seriously add it in. However, Yonghua found that the 20,000 yuan she donated last year was still on the top of the left-hand page. After a few months, the aid station's donation income was less than 2,000 yuan. Compared to the large amount of expenses, this little bit of money was too insignificant. Looking at the few lines of scribbled words, Poplar Fruit's heart was heavy. The so-called small stream flows long. It really should be like this. Poplar Fruit somewhat understood why Fong Beibei was so against him buying a luxury car. Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit's dignified expression, and there was a faint sadness on her face. The only ones who weren't affected by Poplar Fruit's mood were Kiki and Goldie, the two little ones. Kiki had been struggling to get down. At this time, Poplar Fruit patted his head. He had forgotten to carry the baby walker down. Seeing that Fong Beibei was going to carry a heavy bucket of dog food, Poplar Fruit quickly stopped in front of her and said with a smile, "Leave all the work to me. You can guide by the side and take a look at Kiki." Poplar Fruit didn't allow any explanation and stuffed Kiki into Fong Beibei's arms. Then he rolled up his sleeves and picked up 2 buckets of dog food at the same time, one on the left and one on the right, and walked to the left passage. "Wrong, wrong." Fong Beibei laughed and shouted from behind, "Go to the right." Her laughter was like a wind chime, floating with the breath of youth. However, her laughter soon stopped abruptly, because Kiki, who had been struggling for a long time, finally impatiently put her finger into Fong Beibei's mouth. Fong Beibei spat and patted Kiki's little butt. She pretended to be angry and said, "Kiki, you are being naughty again." Poplar Fruit had to scoop rice for hundreds of dogs. This work was not easy, and he had to distribute it evenly. Otherwise, the dogs who didn't get any dog food would be hungry later. Poplar Fruit was not very good at math. Fong Beibei, while holding Kiki, who was running around, looked out. If there was too much food, she would immediately remind Poplar Fruit. Fong Beibei was also not easy. She had to lead Kiki, who was too energetic. Kiki was chasing after Gold's footsteps. Gold, who had entered the big kennel, was completely wild. He ran around and kept raising his forelegs to hit the dog cage. Generally speaking, most dogs would think that Gold was coming over to snatch the food. Then, when Gold made such a fuss, they would immediately stand up and slap the cage with their forelimbs. After teasing them, Gold would immediately change its target and look for the next target to tease. For a time, Gold was running wild. Kiki pulled Fong Beibei and screamed behind him. The whole kennel was in a mess, and the dogs barking came one after another. Of course, there were also some dogs who were too lazy to care about Gold. They silently lay in the cage, thinking about life. However, Poplar Fruit found that the Samoyed he saw last year had disappeared. He didn't know if it really died of depression. Poplar Fruit didn't ask Fong Beibei, because it would only evoke sadness. Papa, Kiki didn't know when she came to Poplar Fruit's side, looking up at her father with her pure and innocent big eyes. Poplar Fruit glanced at Fong Beibei, who was sweating at the back, then squatted down with a smile and asked Kiki, "What's wrong?" He didn't touch Kiki's head because his hands were a little dirty. "Open, open," Kiki said in a childish voice, but her expression was very serious. "What?" Poplar Fruit froze for a moment, looked at the direction where Kiki was looking, and asked, "Kiki, do you want Dad to open the cage?" "Open, open." Kiki suddenly waved her small hand and pointed in a circle. If Kiki was wearing a white and flawless ballet dress, her circle just now would have really captivated many dance enthusiasts. In Poplar Fruit's eyes, his daughter's waving small hand, at that moment, seemed to have turned into a pair of light wings. The radiance of an angel appeared on her face. "Open all of them?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Kiki pursed her lips and nodded her small head. Poplar Fruit opened his mouth and then looked helplessly at Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei smiled. She squatted down, hugged Kiki in her arms and kissed her little face, and then said, "Beibei's sister knows that Kiki has a good heart. I want these dogs to be able to run freely like Gold. But now is not the time for the dogs to come out to play. They need to eat their fill, and then take a sweet nap. Only in the afternoon can they come out to play happily." Fong Beibei said softly, "Kiki, don't you think so?" Kiki blinked her big eyes in confusion. She did not quite understand Fong Beibei's words, but she could feel the kindness in Fong Beibei's tone, and finally smiled. While struggling, she waved at Gold. Chapter 264. Yao Dehua attached great importance to this conference. Although he planned to hold a quarterly conference every 3 months, this was, after all, the first national conference since Sina Translation expanded. Under Yao Dehua's instructions, Sina Translation head office held this event as an annual conference. Not only were there a lot of people participating, in addition to the regional managers, branch managers, and all the gold medal translators who had joined the company, but the scale of the event was also relatively large. Sina Translation had directly booked a resort in Xiuyue, and they would be staying there for 2 days and 3 nights. Poplar Fruit, as the vice president of the translation department, did not have the awareness of a vice president. He did not go to the welcome party on the first night. In his mind, this position only had one mission, and that was to help Yao Dehua watch over the team and prevent unruly situations from occurring. That was enough. As for the parties for eating, drinking, and having fun, Poplar Fruit, who had been idle for a year, was too lazy to go and did not want to go. As a result, when Poplar Fruit casually sat on the rostrum during the meeting the next day, the managers from all the regions and the top interpreters from the minority languages were all shocked. "Who's this?" This was the most popular question among the crowd. "There are many thorns below. You should be careful." Sitting next to Poplar Fruit, the vice president of the translation department, Lao Jiqiang, who was in charge of minority languages, turned off the microphone and whispered to Poplar Fruit. Lao Jiqiang was a veteran who had followed Yao Dehua for many years. When the company was not big, he had been a small middle-level cadre in the translation department because his language skills were not good. He had been doing some coordination and planning work. This time, taking advantage of the expansion of Sina Translation, he became the vice president of the translation department, and he was even the vice president of the core department. He could be said to be in charge of a large team. It could be said that he had reached the sky in a single bound. However, he also knew that in the translation industry, qualifications were not the most important thing. In the end, what mattered was one's ability, and what he lacked was ability. Although he was diligent and had a high talent in management, he was not confident in managing a group of top interpreters who were stronger than him in terms of ability. Later, Yao Dehua signed Poplar Fruit, who was also the deputy general manager of the interpreters department. In terms of responsibilities, Poplar Fruit was on the same level as Yao Dehua. At that time, there were all kinds of rumors in the company, saying that Yao Dehua did not trust Lao Jiqiang and wanted to plant spies around him. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't be able to eat or sleep. However, Lao Jiqiang was different. When he received this news, he was not worried. Instead, he was overjoyed. Others might not know who the poplar fruit was, but Lao Jiqiang couldn't be more familiar with the poplar fruit. Do you know who told Yao Dehua about poplar fruit completing the first small language mission? That's right, it was Lao Jiqiang. Lao Jiqiang had seen poplar fruit's growth over the past year. Everyone knew that his English was exceptionally good, but he was also a gold medal interpreter in almost 10 small languages. Lao Jiqiang could still vividly remember the process of Yang Gua going from 0 to invincible and invincible in conquering the various small language fortresses one after another. In the face of such a monster, Lao Jiqiang could not even feel jealous. Not to mention that poplar fruit was on the same level as him. Even if it were him, he would not complain at all. However, he was happy because he understood poplar fruit. Last year, Boss Yao had tried to recruit poplar fruit many times, but to no avail. Although he did not know why he succeeded this year, according to his understanding of poplar fruit would definitely not interfere with his work. This was because poplar fruit was an indifferent person. If he wanted to fight, why would he wait until now? Later on, he went to visit poplar fruit several times, and the facts proved his conjecture. What made him even happier was that with poplar fruit backing him up and suppressing these arrogant gold medal interpreters, his management skills would definitely be able to be put to good use. Not only would he not have any conflict with poplar fruit, but they could even faintly complement each other. After hearing Lao Jiqiang's words, poplar fruit smiled. He turned on the microphone and tapped it lightly. As expected of a resort, the sound system in this large conference room was very good. With just a light tap, the entire conference room could hear the sound of banging. As if falling into a beehive, the buzzing conference room suddenly became silent. Everyone sitting in the audience shut their mouths and looked up, wanting to hear what poplar fruit, this unfamiliar face, had to say. Sorry, I didn't attend yesterday's cocktail party because I had something to do. Poplar fruit smiled and said, everyone here may not be familiar with me, so I'll introduce myself to everyone here. The 180 people in the audience all stared at poplar fruit. However, for poplar fruit, who had already experienced the big scene of a press conference, there was no psychological pressure. With a charming and confident look on his face, he smiled calmly and said, my name is Poplar Fruit, and my position is the Deputy General Manager of the Interpreter Department. My duties, he glanced at Lao Jiqiang, then continued with a smile, are to assist in managing the small language department under CEO Lao. Lao Jiqiang paused for a moment. Then he immediately understood that poplar fruit took a step back because he was worried about weakening his prestige. The gratitude in his heart was surging like a mountain collapsing and the sea splitting. Seeing that Lao Jiqiang did not refute, the audience was in an uproar. They never thought that the person who went up not only was not a mistake, but also became their deputy general manager, the other deputy general manager that Yao Dehua mentioned at the cocktail party. So young. Could he be a relative of the boss? Forget about Lao Jiqiang. He also wants to lead us? There was a lot of discussion in the audience, and it was getting louder and louder. There was even a feeling that poplar fruit on the stage could not hear them. As an employee, if there was any dissatisfaction, it was not appropriate to directly conflict with the superiors. The regional managers who were well-versed in this field were silent. This group of old foxes knew that the people they brought were not easy to deal with, so they all squatted on the side to watch the show. There was a gold medal interpreter in his early 30s, probably with a very low EQ. Under the urging of the people next to him, he stood up and pointed at poplar fruit and scolded, "Is this how Cinda starts a company? Finding a young man who doesn't know anything to blindly give orders? Even a family business should not trample on people like this, right?" As soon as he said this, the audience suddenly quieted down. In fact, this young gold medal interpreter had said what was in their hearts. It was just that the hunter would shoot the bird that stood out. Moreover, he was a newly appointed official. When he was punished as an example to others, other than his own manager, whose face turned green. The others looked at him gloatingly and secretly guessed what would happen to him. Lao Jiqiang's face sank. He felt that he was losing face. He did not expect this group of people to not give him any face. Even a troublemaker would not go around behaving atrociously like this, right? Everyone, please use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 265. Xiang Shihua, what are you doing? His manager hurriedly grabbed his hand and scolded. What are you doing? Sit down. No. Xiang Shihua straightened his neck, straightened his back, and stubbornly looked at Poplar Fruit and said, if Xinda doesn't give us an explanation today, I won't work here. I came to Xinda because I believe that Xinda will provide us translators with a good platform. If President Yao is so muddle-headed as to use a relative who hasn't even grown hair to criticize our work, then what's the point of staying in this place? You're a little too straightforward with your words, said Qin Wentian. Poplar Fruit, who was sitting on the rostrum, did not wait for Lao Jiqiang to come out and smooth things over. He suddenly said, but I like it. The audience, including Lao Jiqiang, was stunned. They were confused. What did Poplar Fruit mean by this? The other party had already slapped him in the face, and he still said he liked it? Poplar Fruit smiled, pulled the microphone from the short stand, stood up, and walked down the rostrum. Under everyone's anxious gazes, he walked towards Xiang Shihua and said with a smile, in this world, there are 3 types of people who can do things. The first type is those with connections, the second type is those with ability, and the third type is those with talent. You can become a gold medal translator of Xinda and dare to stand up and question me. This shows that you are talented. Talented people dare to speak out righteously, although it is easy to offend people. Poplar Fruit smiled, but he has his own opinions, and what this society lacks the most is independent opinions. So I like it very much. You said so much. Xiang Shihua glared and said stiffly, are you trying to confuse me? Then prove that you are someone with connections and can do things? Let me tell you, everyone here deals with words. No matter how glib your tongue is, it is useless. On the contrary, Poplar Fruit smiled, looked into his eyes, and said sincerely, not only am I not a relative of President Yao, but I also don't have any other connections to help me sit in the position of vice president. Then you are the so-called person with ability? Xiang Shihua asked disdainfully. You have management ability, so you want to lead us? You want a layman to guide an expert? Mr. Lao is more talented in languages than you, although he's not that good either. Everyone knew that he was mocking Poplar Fruit, but his words were laced with sarcasm. He even offended Lao Jiqiang. Ha! Poplar Fruit laughed and said, you're wrong. I'm not a capable person. I don't know how to manage, and I've never managed before. Besides, with President Lao, who is so good at management, why do we need another vice president in charge of management? That's right. Isn't this an unnecessary move? That's what I wanted to ask you too. Xiang Shihua still asked stiffly. Ah! Suddenly, a scream came from a corner, attracting everyone's attention. There was a girl with black-rimmed glasses sitting there, blushing and covering her mouth. I suddenly remembered, isn't Poplar Fruit the #1 interpreter in the company that President Yao mentioned in the newspaper? She whispered softly. However, because the meeting room was quiet, her voice was still heard by many people. Although it was more than half a year ago, Poplar Fruit's incident was an important promotion point for Xinda when they took their first step into the national market. When she said that, many people who paid attention to the industry recalled it. That's right, Poplar Fruit. So it's him. He's so young. He was already #1 at that time. Someone sighed. TSK? #1? That's only in Guangdong province. At most, he's #1 in Huanan. Back then, Xinda didn't even come to our region. Someone commented in disdain, he probably won't be that good in the national market. In terms of education resources, Beijing and Shanghai were far better than Guangzhou. Therefore, it was common for people from Huanan to look down on interpreters from other regions. That's not right. Someone suddenly remembered and questioned. I remember that he's a gold medalist in English. Why is he here? This voice clearly entered Xiang Shihua's ears. He immediately grabbed onto it and questioned Poplar Fruit. Fine, you're also a gold medalist. I believe that you're a capable person, but you're a gold medalist in English. Why are you in charge of our small language department? Isn't this just a layman guiding an expert? Here, I'd like to interrupt. Lao Jiqiang patted the microphone and smiled. You guys don't know this, but our President Yang is a language genius. Not only does he know English, but he also knows many other small languages. Even if he knows other languages, so what? Can he guide us? There are many people in the country who can speak 2 foreign languages. Other than French, I also know English. Everyone has their own specialization. How can an English learner like him help us? Xiang Shihua shouted before Lao Jiqiang could finish. You're a gold medalist in French? Poplar Fruit still asked with a smile. Yes, what's wrong? Xiang Shihua angrily looked at Poplar Fruit and asked, do you also want to question my ability? Hee, that won't happen. I believe that the company's rating is fair and just. Poplar Fruit laughed. You said that a layman can't guide an expert. Then take you as an example. Tell me, what level do I need to reach to guide you? Take me as an example? Xiang Shihua looked puzzled and said, then your French must be better than mine. How can I prove that my French is better than yours? By the way, I also know a little French. Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. A little French is enough? Xiang Shihua shook his head and said, then I'll give you a chance. Look at him saying, I'll give you a chance. His momentum was a bit too arrogant. However, Poplar Fruit was not angry. He still looked calm, as if everything was under control. Let's not compete in translation. It's too troublesome and a waste of everyone's time. Xiang Shihua said, let's compete in French interpretation. Is there anyone here who knows French? No one answered. Of course, it was impossible for there to be no one. He looked around and looked at a middle-aged man and said, Mr. Ding, yesterday at the cocktail party, you were also a gold medalist in French, right? Can I trouble you to be a judge for us? The middle-aged man was stunned and sat there reluctantly. He turned his head and looked helplessly at his colleagues who were also gold medalists in French. They all looked away, unwilling to get involved in this dispute. Poplar Fruit glanced at his badge and said with a smile, Mr. Ding Ku, it's okay. Ding Ku regretted it. He shouldn't have drunk 2 more glasses of red wine yesterday. He was dizzy and went around greeting people. He even provoked this hothead. Now that Poplar Fruit had spoken, he had to bite the bullet and stand up. Everyone, take your votes and throw them at the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 266. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, well, the referee is here. Tell me, how do you want to compete? Xiang Shihua said seriously, I won't limit you. Let's do it this way. Each of us will translate an article. If you translate better than me, then I will submit to your management. In the future, if you say 1, I won't say 4. But if you don't translate as well as me, then I'm sorry, I don't recognize you as my leader. Okay, it's a deal. If I can't beat you, I will resign as the vice president, and I will recommend you to President Yao to take over my position. Yang will like people like Xiang Shihua more and more. Although it was easy for him to say things that made people embarrassed, he was a straightforward person. He didn't beat around the bush and didn't play tricks. It's a deal. Xiang Shihua patted Poplar Fruit's outstretched palm. Poplar Fruit asked, what article to translate? To be fair, Xiang Shihua said, Teacher Ding, please use your mobile phone to go online. Any website will do. Find 2 recent news reports of similar length and read them out separately. We will translate 1 article each. Ding Ku saw that Poplar Fruit also nodded, so he had to take out his mobile phone and check. He opened 2 websites, and after 3 or 4 minutes, he raised his head and said, it's done. Do you want to go first, or should I? Poplar Fruit looked at Xiang Shihua and asked, I'll go first. Xiang Shihua said confidently. He believed in his ability and thought that Poplar Fruit would take the initiative to retreat after seeing his performance. Translation and interpretation were indeed 2 different professions. But in the field of small languages where interpreters were scarce, interpreters didn't distinguish them so clearly. For example, Xiang Shihua would also translate for a few days if someone invited him, so he was very confident in his interpretation ability. Then I'll start reading. Ding Ke looked at Xiang Shihua, then focused on the mobile phone screen and began to read the first news article. Ding Ke's speech speed was not fast. It was slower than normal speech, and he even paused every 2 sentences. The pause was to give Xiang Shihua time to translate. As a gold medal French interpreter, Xiang Shihua's ability was naturally not bad. He looked at Ding Ke, but his eyes were not focused, and a string of French slipped out of his mouth. Xiang Shihua's French pronunciation was very standard, and his ability to use words and make sentences was not bad. It could be said that he was good enough to be a French teacher in a university. After translating the entire article, Xiang Shihua's translation was very smooth except for a few sentences. It might not be strict enough, but for an interpreter, this was already very good. The dozen or so people present who knew French applauded one after another. After translating, Xiang Shihua's eyes finally focused. He wiped his sweat. For this competition, he still put in his best effort. Although he was not very interested in the position of Poplar Fruit's vice president, he still wanted to frustrate Poplar Fruit's spirit and let him understand who the best French gold medal interpreter was. He was a little extreme again. Looking at Poplar Fruit with a little pride, Xiang Shihua was looking forward to the shock, retreat, and even worship of Poplar Fruit. However, he was going to be disappointed because Yangguo's expression was still as calm as ever, as if all his efforts just now were nothing more than the most common fallen leaves in the autumn wind, and there was nothing worthy of his attention. Xiang Shihua looked at Poplar Fruit's eyes with a sense of anger. However, Poplar Fruit did not pay attention to him. He nodded to Ding Ke and said with a smile, "Mr. Ding, I am also ready. You can read the next article." The people around were stunned, especially the French gold medal interpreters. They looked at Poplar Fruit in disbelief. There was already Xiang Shihua in front of him, and Poplar Fruit still wanted to humiliate himself by challenging him? Or was he pretending to be calm and stubbornly refusing to admit defeat? Ding Ke's right thumb swiped on the phone, clicked on the second article, and then began to read. Before he finished reading the first sentence, Poplar Fruit began to translate, which made Ding Ke stunned. He raised his head and looked at Poplar Fruit with his mouth open. He seemed to be very puzzled and asked, "Mr. Yang, you can't be like this. I haven't stopped yet. Can't you remember 2 sentences? You want to translate 1 sentence at a time?" Poplar Fruit saw that he stopped reading, so he stopped and said with a smile, "Why don't you continue? It's okay. You read yours, and I will flip mine. You don't have to stop. Just read from top to bottom." After starting again, everyone was surprised to find that Poplar Fruit was doing simultaneous translation. Basically, when Ding Ke read half a sentence, Poplar Fruit began to translate. If Ding Ke did not stop, Poplar Fruit did not stop either. Although there was a difference of 1 or 2 seconds, wasn't this synchronous interpretation? Many people present did not understand French, but they were all in the language industry. They still had the ability to distinguish between Xiang Shihua and Poplar Fruit, whose spoken language was better. Compared with Xiang Shihua's standard, Poplar Fruit's fluent spoken language was really much better. Moreover, Poplar Fruit's spoken language had a foreign flavor, unlike Xiang Shihua, who sounded like a non-native speaker. Others did not understand, but Xiang Shihua understood. He was now staring straight at Poplar Fruit's mouth. He could not believe that the French that sounded as good as the foreign French teacher when he was in school came from Poplar Fruit's mouth. If his eyes were covered, he would not believe that the person who said these words was not a Frenchman. As for whether the translation was correct or not, Xiang Shihua tried to find some shortcomings of Poplar Fruit from this in the first 10 sentences, but all he heard was that Poplar Fruit was perfect. Poplar Fruit's translation was really good. Xiang Shihua even felt that even if he had enough time to translate slowly in the dictionary, he would not be able to do such a good translation. Poplar Fruit's translation was based on the terrifying synchronous translation. If this competition was not proposed by him, and Ding Ke, who was the referee, was chosen by him, Xiang Shihua would have thought that Poplar Fruit was prepared in advance to trap him. After Poplar Fruit finished translating, the surroundings were so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Unlike when Xiang Shihua had just finished translating, there were many people who understood French applauding. Now, everyone was looking at Poplar Fruit with shock and doubt. Is there really someone so good? to be able to master two languages so well? This was the voice of most people. You don't have to say anything. Xiang Shihua suddenly walked out of his seat and walked in front of Poplar Fruit. He bowed deeply and then looked seriously at Poplar Fruit and said, President Yang, if you agree to bet, you must accept your loss. Your French is indeed better than mine, and much better. Xiang Shihua admits defeat. Just now it was my fault. In the future, I, Xiang Shihua, will absolutely obey your instructions. In addition, in the study and work of French, I hope that I can learn more from President Yang in the future. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 267. Poplar Fruit put down the microphone and patted Xiang Shihua's arm. In the company, don't worry, we will have many opportunities to communicate in the future. Poplar Fruit was relieved that he had dealt with the troublemaker. He was about to leave. Wait, Mr. Yang, wait. Suddenly, someone stood up and shouted. Not only Poplar Fruit, but many others frowned and looked at the guy. It was reasonable for Xiang Shihua to be alone, but the matter had already been settled. What was the meaning of this? His eyes shone with greed as he said, Hello, Mr. Yang. I'm Pang Dingkong, the manager of the Jincheng branch. I'm also a gold medal Arabic interpreter. Yanghua looked at him for 2 seconds, and a familiar smile appeared on her face. Oh, Manager Pang, do you have any questions? No, I don't have any questions. I'm just a little confused. Pang Dingkong chuckled. Mr. Yang, you are indeed very good at English and French. We all admit that. However, French is not the only language you speak. Do you think you can convince us that you are better than Mr. Yang? Otherwise, what's the difference between this and Xiang Shihua's suggestion of a layman guiding an expert? Oh, Manager Pang, you want to compete with me in Arabic? That way, you won't be dissatisfied, right? Yanghua was a little angry in his heart, but he still asked with a smile. His tone was the same as usual, without any fluctuations. Of course, I won't make a fuss. Let's compete according to Xiang Shihua's suggestion. If Mr. Yang wins, I, Old Pang, will be your man. Pang Dingkong patted his chest as he spoke. As he spoke, his small eyes peeked at Poplar Fruit and the others. Arabic was a relatively unpopular minority language. Pang Dingkong was sure that even if Poplar Fruit knew it, he would not be better than him. After all, as someone who majored in Arabic, he knew how difficult it was to learn Arabic. It was almost impossible to learn so many other languages and still be able to achieve the same level of proficiency in Arabic as him. Poplar Fruit didn't even need to think before he agreed. All right, let's compete. Who will be the referee? Wait, Director Yang. Pang Dingkong's eyes flickered as he asked, Is the condition you mentioned to your friend still valid? If I beat you, your position will be mine. Yes. If you beat me, I will recommend you to Vice President Yao. Poplar Fruit smiled and said word by word. Lao Jiqiang, who was on the rostrum, did not say a word. He looked at Pang Dingkong angrily. If Xiang Zhihua was just a troublemaker who refused to be disciplined, then Pang Dingkong had other intentions. Lao Jiqiang made a mental note of Pang Dingkong's name. In his heart, Pang Dingkong was already a dead man. All right then, let's look for Old One, you also know Arabic. Can you be the referee? Pang Dingkong was overjoyed. He looked around and asked loudly. Wait, let's not do this time. Who is learning Arabic? Poplar Fruit waved his hand and asked. Although he didn't say it explicitly, it was obvious that he didn't trust the person that Pang Dingkong had found. The person who had just stood up looked at Poplar Fruit awkwardly. He didn't know whether to sit or stand. At this time, 5 or 6 Arabic gold translators raised their hands at Poplar Fruit's question. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Please, everyone, be the referee. He turned to look at Xiang Shihua and said with a smile, Brother Xiang, can I trouble you to help me find 2 new articles? No problem. Xiang Shihua stood up again and said loudly. He glanced at Pang Dingkong and took out his phone to find 2 articles. Then he said, Okay, who's going first? Manager Pang, why don't you go first? Poplar Fruit looked at Pang Dingkong and asked with a smile. Pang Dingkong, whose forehead was covered in sweat, nodded reluctantly. This was a big change from his previous plan. He didn't care about wiping the sweat off his forehead. Instead, he focused on listening to Xiang Shihua. Wait! Pang Dingkong interrupted Xiang Shihua before he could finish reading. He looked at Poplar Fruit awkwardly and said, "It's a little too far away. I can't hear you clearly. You're reading too fast. Brother Xiang, please read it louder so that everyone can be quiet," Poplar Fruit said. "Read it slowly." Xiang Shihua read aloud. Just like Ding Ku, he paused after every 2 sentences. Pang Dingkong started to interpret, but everyone could tell that he was not as fluent as Xiang Shihua, even though he was speaking a different language. Pang Dingkong was stuttering as he translated. He even lowered his voice in some parts in an attempt to muddle through. He might have been able to fool a layman, but everyone present was well-versed in languages, who couldn't tell what he was trying to say. Not to mention the others, even the top Arabic translators frowned. After he finished translating the article, Pang Dingkong wiped his sweat and smiled awkwardly. "Mr. Yang, it's your turn." His plan had gone awry. He could only pray that Poplar Fruit was worse than him. Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded at Xiang Shihua. Xiang Shihua didn't start reading immediately. He raised his head and asked Poplar Fruit, "Mr. Yang, what's yours?" Just like before, read it at a normal speed. Don't pause. Poplar Fruit answered confidently. Pang Dingkong panicked when he heard Poplar Fruit's words. Poplar Fruit's performance was still amazing. His Arabic was 100 times more fluent than Pang Dingkong's. After listening to Poplar Fruit's translation, everyone applauded, regardless of whether they understood Arabic or not. Was there a need to compare? This was a difference that could be heard clearly. The Arabic gold medal translators sitting around them all had looks of admiration in their eyes. Was there a need to say anything more? Before they could announce the result, Pang Dingkong sighed and said, "Mr. Yang, you're amazing." He sat down and didn't dare to raise his head again. Compared to Xiang Shihua, Pang Dingkong was a sore loser. He didn't even admit defeat. However, everyone knew that he wouldn't be able to cause any more trouble. As mentioned before, the translation industry was a circle that placed a lot of emphasis on strength. Those without strength would find it difficult to be recognized. Those with strength would quickly be valued and supported. Yang Guo had defeated 2 experts in a row, proving her amazing ability in the 2 minor languages. The eyes of the gold medal interpreters present were now looking at Yang Guo in a very different light. Many of them had a fanatical look in their eyes. Poplar Fruit didn't return to the rostrum. Instead, he stood in the middle of the crowd with a smile. He asked in a low voice, "Who else?" Chapter 268. Who else? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Who else wants to challenge me? Of course, there are so many different languages in the world. Poplar Fruit is not a machine. The languages that I know are... Poplar Fruit counted with his fingers. The European languages include French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Russian, Swedish, and Dutch. The Asian languages include Korean, Japanese, Thai, Nanyue, and Hindi. That's all I know at the moment. Within the range that Poplar Fruit knows, everyone can compete with me. He only learned Hindi before he went abroad. There were many Hindi people in the United States. Poplar Fruit even chatted with a few of them. The comments that he got were still very good. Poplar Fruit's words shocked everyone present. 13 languages? Poplar Fruit, are you trying to defy the natural order? There were many people in the world who knew many languages, but they were basically old pedants who hid in the ivory tower. In such an impetuous society, knowing English basically meant that one would not have to worry about food and clothing. Knowing 2 or 3 foreign languages could make a lot of money. No matter how many foreign languages one knew, it would not increase the number of times. Learning 13 languages was definitely a pain in the ass for him to be bored to death. However, for Poplar Fruit, this was not the case. In fact, 13 languages were not that difficult for Poplar Fruit. For example, Poplar Fruit had learned French before, so it was easy for him to pick it up. Spanish was similar to Portuguese. It would only take a few days to learn a second language after learning one. As for the Asian languages, Japanese and Nanyue, Many of their language habits were similar to Chinese. In comparison, it was much faster to learn. Thai and Hindi evolved from ancient Sanskrit. There were many similarities between the two. Although it was a bit of a headache to learn, it was easier to learn after mastering the pronunciation. Therefore, Poplar Fruit felt that since God gave him such a strong language talent, why not make full use of it? If he didn't use it, it would be a waste. Among all the people present, only Lao Jiqiang did not express any surprise. Although compared to his understanding of Poplar Fruit also knew Hindi, Lao Jiqiang did not show any surprise. However, in the face of the monstrous Poplar Fruit, he was so numb that he couldn't be surprised anymore. After hearing Poplar Fruit count so many languages, one person couldn't help but stand up. "Hello, Director Yang." The person who stood up was a middle-aged man. He wasn't tall and was dressed plainly in a gray suit. He didn't look like a flamboyant person. Seeing that Poplar Fruit's eyes were focused on him, he was somewhat flustered. Breathing heavily, he said, "Chief Yang, my name is Wang Jinping. I'm a Nanhua translator, the gold medal translator of Western Guangdong Province." "Brother Wang, don't worry. Speak slowly." Poplar Fruit smiled and comforted him. "I don't want to compete with you, nor do I want to compete with you for your position. I just feel that it's strange that you've learned so many popular languages, but you actually understand our business volume and some of the less popular languages." Wang Jinping said, "So I want to discuss this Nanhua language with you, Mr. Yang." From his tone, one could tell that he was still somewhat unconvinced. The reason was obvious. The Nanhua language was a small language that was unpopular to the point that it couldn't be more unpopular. There weren't many people who were willing to learn and study it. Wang Jinping was able to become a gold medal translator. This road could be said to be difficult, but Poplar Fruit shamelessly said that after learning so many languages, he also learned Nanhua language. Moreover, he said that he was confident that his Nanhua language was unrivaled. How could Wang Jinping accept this? "However, Director Yang, you really don't misunderstand. We are just having a small competition. I am not unconvinced by your management. You can rest assured that no matter the result, I will work very hard." Wang Jinping nervously shook his hand and said, "It's okay." Poplar Fruit smiled. "Let's give it a try. Just treat it as an academic discussion. To be honest, after learning Nanhua language, I haven't communicated with our domestic scholars." "Thank you, Brother Wang, for giving me this opportunity." Wang Jinping directly started a conversation in Nanhua language. This made Poplar Fruit a little surprised because Wang Jinping didn't follow the previous model of translating the news. Wang Jinping's Nanhua language was quite fluent. Although there was no other Nanhua language translator present, it was quite comfortable to listen to. Just based on the first impression, it was enough to give him full marks. Poplar Fruit was not to be outdone. He blurted out the same fluent Nanhua language. At this time, Wang Jinping's eyes showed a surprised expression. He asked in Nanhua language, "Director Yang, have you also lived in Nanhua? I didn't expect your Nanhua language to be so authentic." After Wang Jinping graduated from university, he joined a state-owned enterprise. As the translator of their factory leader, he settled in Nanhua country. 5 years of living in Nanhua country not only trained his Nanhua language level, but also honed his accent to be no different from a local. And Poplar Fruit also spoke authentic Nanhua language, which made him very surprised. Poplar Fruit smiled and shook his head. He told him, "I have never been to Nanhua country, but I met a Nanhua friend on the internet who was willing to chat with me. So I learned the standard pronunciation of Nanhua language from him." Wang Jinping and Poplar Fruit chatted in Nanhua language for 10 minutes. This made Poplar Fruit a lot interested in him. Because Wang Jinping's Nanhua language didn't just stop at the level of speaking. From the conversation, Poplar Fruit could feel that Wang Jinping's research on Nanhua language was very in-depth. Wang Jinping had read a lot of Nanhua classics. This was something that Poplar Fruit couldn't do. At most, he knew that there were some titles and history, but he didn't have the time or resources to read them one by one. But for Wang Jinping, who was only a commercial translator, to be able to spend so much time and effort to delve into the knowledge of a language, this was an amazing thing. Just when Poplar Fruit was interested in Wang Jinping, and wanted to discuss with him in depth, Wang Jinping suddenly changed to Chinese. He sighed softly and said, "Director Yang, you are right. I'm not as good as you in manual language." The audience was a little confused by Wang Jinping's sudden retreat. Poplar Fruit was also surprised. He didn't think that he won. In the conversation, the two of them were at most evenly matched. So he asked, "Brother Wang, why do you say that? We didn't decide the winner." "No, Director Yang. I know that my reaction is not good enough. Your manual language level is not worse than mine. But once the written test starts, I can't do simultaneous interpretation. But you should have no problem, so I still lost." Wang Jinping shook his head and said, "You can't say that. We are both translators. What does simultaneous interpretation have to do with us?" Poplar Fruit laughed. "So, you didn't lose and I didn't win." Chapter 269. Poplar Fruit looked at the 180 people present and said with a smile, "You may not understand my conversation with Wang Jinping, but I can tell you that Wang Jinping's foundation in the Nanuan language is very solid. He even gave me the feeling of a college quiz student because he is willing to put in the effort to learn and research the language he is working in." Translation is an industry that values knowledge. As a translator, if you don't always keep up with the times and learn, you will be abandoned by the market one day. Poplar Fruit said seriously, "The company is not a place to raise idlers. Don't think that you can live a life of luxury just because you have the title of a gold medal translator. The company is researching and preparing to launch a plan for gold medal translators and even an annual review of translation titles. In other words, if you don't reach the level of a gold medal translator this year and fail the annual review, you will fall to the level of a silver medal translator. The translation department is not a place for everyone to retire. As a gold medal translator of the company, you should set an example." Poplar Fruit said seriously, "Of course, people who work hard will get more opportunities than others. And these opportunities are fought for by us, Mr. Lau, the translation department, and the employees in charge of the company's business. I know that many of you don't recognize Mr. Lau's leadership and think that a person who has not achieved much in the translation industry cannot lead you. Therefore, the head office sent me here. My duty is to build a bridge of communication between you and CEO Lau. I don't know anything about management, the company, or the operation of the platform, but I understand you, and CEO Lau also hopes to understand you. Because our goal is to build a mutually beneficial platform for all of our colleagues in the translation industry. You should know this when you join the company. So, why don't we work together to make this platform better?" Poplar Fruit said firmly. Lao Jiqiang took the lead in applauding, followed by thunderous applause. Especially Xiang Shihua and Wang Jinping, who were impressed by Poplar Fruit, clapped so hard that people were a little worried about their palms. Poplar Fruit did not think that it was because of his words that everyone was affected. Many of the people present were leaders in their own fields. They were used to being arrogant. It would be underestimating them to be fooled by a few words. To be able to receive such an enthusiastic response, it was mainly because Yangguo's incomparably valiant performance just now had truly shocked them. As the saying goes, there is always someone better than you. Only when you see it will you put away your arrogance and obey the command of the strong. This was the truth. The next meeting was much smoother. Lao Jiqiang announced the topic of this meeting: how to improve the recognition of the minority language translation industry and increase the task volume in the minority language translation industry. After that, almost everyone enthusiastically participated in the discussion. Most of the people present, except for a few managers, used to be in this industry. Not all of them were full-time translators, but they all had their own unique understanding of this industry. Therefore, once the meeting formed a heated discussion atmosphere, everyone was willing to participate in this brainstorm. Never underestimate anyone. Even if they were inconspicuous, they might have a flash of inspiration at a certain moment and bring huge benefits to the company. For example, a female translator named Zhang Yan. She was not very tall, but she put forward a huge and great suggestion. She said that since the society was not familiar with the minority language industry, why not imitate the World Expo and the Cantonese Trade Fair and hold a translation expo on minority languages? Although this suggestion was too big and could only be thought of at the moment, it might not be impossible to become a module of the company's development blueprint. If this plan was built well and could win the support of the government, it would be very important for the minority language industry and even the entire translation industry. During the lunch break, Poplar Fruit ran to the small garden outside the building, took out his phone, and looked at the missed calls. When he was competing with Xiang Shihua, he felt the phone in his trouser pocket vibrate, but because he had been in a meeting, he did not have time to check. It turned out to be Song Jiwen calling, but Song Jiwen almost never called him in the morning on weekdays. Poplar Fruit thought, did he find the whereabouts of Che and Jiwen? It has been 2 or 3 days, and there should be news. He dialed his phone, and sure enough, Song Jiwen found Che and Jiwen's address. He whispered excitedly on the phone, I found this bastard. How about it? Do you want me to help you find someone to teach this guy a lesson? No need, Poplar Fruit said. Just give me the address, and I will ask him personally who ordered him to do this. How boring. Leaving me to do it alone, Song Jiwen muttered. I will read the address to you, and you can take notes. Poplar Fruit really did not want Song Jiwen to participate in the martial arts world. After all, Song Jiwen was an ordinary person who only knew how to fight. If he met someone who knew martial arts, it would be easy for him to get hurt. No need to read it. I'm afraid I heard wrong. Send me a text message. Poplar Fruit said. If he read the address out loud, it would be easy to confuse it with homophones. Sending a text message was more intuitive. After hanging up the phone with Song Jiwen, Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry to go back. He sat by the fountain in the center of the garden and called Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei had class today, but it was really inconvenient for Poplar Fruit to bring Kiki with him, so he could only trouble Fong Beibei to take the risk of bringing Kiki to class. Poplar Fruit was worried, so he found an opportunity to ask about the situation. Uncle, you finished the meeting? Fong Beibei asked in surprise on the phone. Not yet, I took a break at noon. I have another meeting in the afternoon, Poplar Fruit said. How is Kiki? Is she okay? Let me tell you, Kiki is too good. So good that you can't believe it, Fong Beibei said proudly. When she entered the classroom, she hugged her Barbie doll and played by the side. She was so quiet that the teacher didn't notice her for 2 periods. Oh, that's good. Poplar Fruit breathed a sigh of relief. I'll have to trouble you to take care of her. What trouble? Kiki is super good, do you know? Fong Beibei laughed. She really didn't. Poplar Fruit ridiculed in his heart. Girls from the 90s were really trendy. She acted cute in front of the people in my class and received a big bag of snacks. In the end, she gave it all to me. Fong Beibei proudly showed off. That's because she doesn't know how to eat yet. Wait a year or 2, then see if she still shares it with you. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but laugh. If she doesn't, then it's because you didn't teach her well, Fong Beibei lectured. Chapter 270. The meeting lasted for 2 days. On the first day, each department would hold their own meeting. On the second day, they would organize and prepare. In the afternoon, they would submit their proposals and obtain financial support from the head office through the oral defense. Therefore, after eating a delicious buffet lunch, they returned to the conference room in the afternoon and continued the meeting. The capital of the English language company was strong, and the market was huge. They were not so enthusiastic about financial support from the head office. On the other hand, as Wang Jinping said at the meeting, under the strong influence of the English language company, the small languages are often not valued. If we want to be recognized by others, then we have to make achievements. Everyone was working hard, trying to find a good idea to fight for more of the small language market. People thought that they could use cheap English translators, so they tried not to look for small language translators. This idea was wrong. If they wanted to be more local and gain profits, small language translators were very important. Many foreign trade companies recognized this point. However, this potential market had not been fully explored. Cinda Translation provided such a good platform for many people who relied on small translation companies or solo talents. But at the same time, Many people didn't realize this and still followed their old path. The incompatibility of the two aspects also led to the current state of Shinda's translation of small languages being neither awkward nor hot. It was not difficult to find the problem. The difficult part was how to solve it. Some translators suggested to let the company advertise in the TV station. This idea was not very realistic. The TV station's advertising fee was so expensive. How much could they get back? Some translators also suggested to hold a university competition. This way, they could quickly attract the small language talents in the universities to participate and gradually build up their reputation. This proposal was feasible, but to attract people through a competition would take a long time. Moreover, it would need to be held continuously. This was not in line with the current topic. Of course, if Shinda translation was free in the future, it could also take the university route. At this time, the girl with black-rimmed glasses who was the first to recognize Poplar Fruit raised her hand high. Poplar Fruit also saw it. He nudged Lao Jiqiang, who was presiding over the meeting, to signal him. If you have any thoughts, just stand up and say it. We're not in a class. Everyone is welcome to speak freely. Lao Jiqiang smiled, pointed at the girl with black-rimmed glasses, and said kindly, "Hello everyone, my name is Chu Tong. I'm a gold medal Russian interpreter from the Jiangnan branch." Chu Tong blushed as she introduced herself shyly. "Tell me what new ideas you have," Poplar Fruit said. He pinched the end of the pen and gently tapped it on the table. He did not take notes of the meeting. What was said was stored in his mind, but he was not satisfied with all the ideas that were submitted. "My idea is that we can consider finding some internet celebrities to help us produce a series of programs," Chu Tong said. As soon as she said this, the entire crowd burst into laughter. Everyone was thinking, this girl is too funny. What kind of idea is this? It doesn't even touch the main topic. Everyone's laughter made Chu Tong's face even redder. She stood there awkwardly, pinching the corner of her clothes, wishing that there was a hole in the ground for her to crawl into. "Everyone quiet down." Lao Jiqiang stood up, clapped his hands, and shouted. Under Lao Jiqiang's shout, the crowd's laughter gradually stopped. "Chu Tong, continue. Finish your thoughts," Lao Jiqiang said kindly. He himself also felt that this idea was a bit ridiculous, but he knew how to control people's hearts. At this time, he had to let Chu Tong continue. If he forcefully rejected Chu Tong, then everyone would be afraid of making a fool of themselves and would not dare to make any suggestions. Poplar Fruit was silent throughout the entire process. His movements did not change. He tapped the pen, but his mind was thinking about Chu Tong's ideas. With the support of the vice president, Chu Tong finally felt a little better, but her face was still red. She took a deep breath and said, "Actually, internet programs are not as worthless as you think. In modern people's fast-paced living conditions, many people are more willing to choose to watch videos on the internet or watch short and fast-paced micromovies. For example, the internet celebrity called Shou Xiaoxing. His video has more than 10 million views. There are many other people whose self-created videos are very popular on the internet. I believe that if we can find one or a few internet celebrities to help us plan some programs, we can spend very little money and in a very short time to let more people know our name," Chu Tong said seriously. "Your idea is very good, but have you considered that the audience of their videos are mainly young people? This will not have much effect on our promotion. What's the use of only young people seeing it? We mainly hope to let more customers discover us and give us more small language tasks." A director of the translation department could not help but stand up and refute. Chu Tong did not consider this point. She stood there and did not know how to answer. "Let me say a few words," Poplar Fruit stood up and said with a smile. "I am also a young person." Poplar Fruit waved his hand and let the director, who was nervous and wanted to apologize, sit down. He smiled and said, "No need to apologize. What you just said is actually reasonable." Chu Tong's suggestion is very enlightening, but you should be the same as Director Liu. You think that people who watch internet videos are all young people. Adults still want to watch some TV series that are more stable and close to life. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "But have you thought about it? If something that is quickly going viral on the internet is placed in front of you, no matter if you are young or middle-aged, Would you consider to take a look? Yes. Poplar Fruit did not wait for their answer and said firmly, "Definitely. It is human nature to be curious. If it is something that everyone is interested in, I must know about it. Most people will have the same idea." I said that I am also a young person because I understand that in our current society, whether it is on the internet or in real life, young people spread information the fastest. Let me give you an example. Last year's tragic incident of Xiaoyi. The broadcast of the news was not the reason this incident spread so quickly across the country. It was because this video was reposted by countless netizens on Weibo that it completely captured the hearts of the entire country. I can say that the effect of the news broadcast may not be as fast as the netizens reposting it. This is what I want to say with this example. Poplar Fruit said, "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."